Director Lee Seokheon is back in town after a whole 40 days in Dubai, and the first thing he does? He heads straight to the office from the airport and calls up CEO Yeonwoo. Now, Yeonwoo tries to play it cool, telling him she was just having lunch and couldn't check her messages right away. But let's be real, she totally saw his message an hour ago and knew exactly what he was up to. Seokheon has been sending her his schedule for the past 2 days, and even though he's not the type to write more than a couple of words at a time, Yeonwoo can read between the lines. She knows he's not just sending her his itinerary for fun, he's got other things on his mind, if you know what I mean. Their hookups have taken them all over the place, the office, his car, her home, but Yeonwoo's been trying to dodge his advances. She even made a half-hearted attempt at rebellion, but Seokheon shut that down real quick with a text that basically said, "If you won't come to me, I'll come to you." Yeonwoo was so shaken by the thought of him showing up in front of her colleagues that she bolted from her lunch table, leaving her confused coworkers in her wake. Now, Seokheon's in the office, and he's not wasting any time. He calls Yeonwoo out on her little white lie about having a good lunch, noting that she only meets his eyes when she's being dishonest. He moves in close, asking if she wants to see him lose his mind, and then he's all over her, kissing her like there's no tomorrow. Yeonwoo's wondering how long they can keep this up. They're stuck in this cycle of desire, neither one willing to cut the other loose. Seokheon's not one to be deterred, though. He's got Yeonwoo up on the table, kissing her neck, while she's trying to remind him that his secretaries are right outside. But he's not having it, he's with his woman, and that's all that matters. Seokheon's got a wild side that needs satisfying 3 to 4 times a week, and Yeonwoo's his go-to girl. She knows they're not really a match, but she can't seem to break free from her role as the director's secret lover. And so, right there in the office, Seokheon gets down to business, leaving Yeonwoo to wonder just how long this crazy ride will last. After their steamy office rendezvous, Seokheon tries to play the gentleman by giving Yeonwoo a new pair of black stockings to replace the ones he ripped in the heat of the moment. But let's be real, he's just being possessive and doesn't want any other guys catching a glimpse of her bare skin. Yeonwoo's not having it though, and tells him she'll buy her own stockings, thank you very much. As she's about to head out, Seokheon's already planning their next hookup. He wants to swing by her place later, but Yeonwoo reminds him that she's not cool with that anymore. So, he suggests a hotel dinner instead. Yeonwoo, wanting to keep their affair on the down low, opts for his place and declines his offer to send a driver. She'll take a taxi, because apparently, she's got standards. Back at the office bathroom, Yeonwoo's colleague comes in with some medicine, thinking she's got a stomach bug. Yeonwoo plays along, lying about getting meds from the dispensary. Then it's off to the PR Team 2 meeting, where the office gossip is in full swing. Manager Young Mi-hyun, the queen bee of the rumor mill, spills the tea about Director Lee's impending promotion and how he's been chosen over the chairman's grandkids. Meanwhile, there's also buzz about a general affairs employee dating their boss, but Mi-hyun's got her eye on someone else, Yeonwoo. As Yeonwoo tries to make a quick exit, Mi-hyun insists on carrying her files, making a backhanded compliment about Yeonwoo's looks. Another colleague steps in, calling Mi-hyun out on her not-so-subtle jab about people with support. Just then, Seokheon walks by, brushing Yeonwoo's hand in a move that doesn't go unnoticed by Mi-hyun. Back in the office, Mi-hyun's got a juicy new tidbit. Apparently, Director Lee is the one getting married soon, based on some tabloid story about him buying rings at Cartier. But another colleague points out that buying rings doesn't necessarily mean wedding bells. Mi-hyun's not buying it though, and she's convinced he's tying the knot. So, Yeonwoo arrives at Seokheon's place later that night, and he greets her, asking if she's eaten. She confirms that she has, and follows him inside. They settle on the couch, and Seokheon brings out a fancy bottle of wine he picked up in Dubai. The next few hours are spent sipping wine, munching on snacks, and talking shop. But then, Yeonwoo spots a jewelry box in Seokheon's hand, and it reminds her of the rumors Mi-hyun mentioned about Director Lee getting rings made. She can't help but ask if the ring isn't meant for her. Seokheon smoothly replies, asking who else it would be for. Yeonwoo brings up the marriage rumors, but he dismisses them as nonsense since he hasn't even proposed yet. Seokheon confirms that the ring is indeed for her, but Yeonwoo's not having it. She jumps up, declaring that it makes no sense for them to get married. What do they have in common besides physical attraction? She lists off all the ways they're different: family background, wealth, social status, and tries to make a quick exit. But Seokheon's not letting her go that easily. He questions how she can tell him to marry someone else when they're together all the time. Yeonwoo insists that's exactly what he should do and demands her purse back. Seokheon's not thrilled about the idea of an arranged marriage with a mistress on the side, like his father. Yeonwoo reminds him that the chairman, whom she calls grandfather, told them to treat each other like siblings, even though they're not blood-related. Seokheon sarcastically remarks that he must be a scumbag who sleeps with his sister then. Yeonwoo turns away, adamant that they can't get married. Seokheon pulls her close, reminding her that they've been together for 2 years and questioning if she can really move on with another man. Yeonwoo wishes she could turn back time to when they despised each other, regretting being kind to him when he was nothing but a jerk. She explains that she started calling him Director Lee when she moved out because living as his sibling was suffocating, and she wanted to establish distance. Seokheon refuses to let her go, presenting her with the ring. Yeonwoo declares she'd rather die than wear it. He insists he doesn't want anyone else, but she grabs the box and throws it, accidentally cutting his face in the process. Yeonwoo's concern for his injury is met with Seokheon's bitter remark about more than just his face hurting. As she tries to leave again, Seokheon stops her, confessing his love and inability to live without her. He kisses her, pleading for her to at least want him physically, even if she can't accept more. With tears in her eyes, they ultimately give in to their desire and head to the bedroom for you-know-what. Yeonwoo wakes up the next morning, all cozy in Seokheon's arms. She decides to start her day with a refreshing shower, and afterwards, she heads to his closet. Lo and behold, there's a whole section dedicated to clothes just for her. She can't help but wonder if he bought all this stuff because she complained about his previous choices being too pricey. Anyway, she gets dressed, grabs a bag, and heads off to work. At the office, Jungmi, the sweet girl who gave Yeonwoo medicine earlier, is already there. Turns out, she came in early for a photo shoot related to a new golf construction project. Yeonwoo, being the awesome colleague she is, gives Jungmi a notebook since she always seems to be running short. But then, Yeonwoo drops a bombshell: she submitted her resignation a month ago. Jungmi is shocked, especially since she's come to rely on Yeonwoo so much. Yeonwoo shares her coffee with Jungmi as a token of their friendship. Now, here's where things get interesting. Jungmi notices Yeonwoo's bag and asks if it's a knockoff Hermes. Yeonwoo, not wanting to spill the beans, says she just bought it off the street because it looked comfy. Jungmi, totally impressed by the fake bag, asks Yeonwoo to let her know if she remembers where she got it. But guess who's standing right behind them? Mihyun, the office gossip queen. Yeonwoo knows this can't be good. Later, Yeonwoo heads to the general office to grab some A4 paper. On her way back, she feels a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. She thinks it might be her period, but it's not supposed to come yet. She rushes to the bathroom to check, and while she's in the stall, she overhears Mihyun dishing out some juicy gossip about her to another girl. Mihyun's all like, Yeonwoo bought a Hermes Goldie bag that costs 11 million won. There's no way an entry-level employee can afford that. She also mentions spotting Yeonwoo and Director Lee together at a department store and hearing about Yeonwoo visiting his office multiple times. They talk about how Yeonwoo usually dresses plain but sometimes brings expensive, logo-free items to work, thinking no one will notice. They even wonder why Director Lee would date Yeonwoo when he could be with an actress. Yeonwoo, still in the stall, thinks to herself that she'd like to know the answer to that too. Before leaving, the gossiping duo remarks that while Yeonwoo's looks aren't that impressive, she must have some other impressive qualities. Yeonwoo emerges from the stall, thinking that she knew this would happen, but it'll be over soon since her resignation was approved that afternoon. Later, in the PR team manager's office, Yeonwoo learns that a new employee is coming the next day to take her position. The manager asks if one day is enough for training, and Yeonwoo assures him it is. It turns out, Yeonwoo's resignation was supposed to be confirmed while Seokheon was still on his business trip. As Yeonwoo gets ready to head out for the day, her phone buzzes with a call from Seokheon, who she's cleverly saved as landlord in her contacts. He informs her that their grandfather wants them to come over today. Yeonwoo, still a bit miffed about the previous day's events, makes Seokheon promise he hasn't spilled the beans to Grandpa. He assures her he'll wait for her green light before saying anything. Seokheon offers to give her a ride, but Yeonwoo's determined to take the bus. However, as she's walking to the bus stop, a car pulls up beside her. Lo and behold, it's Seokheon behind the wheel. He helps her with her seatbelt and tries to charm her out of her grumpy mood, asking about her day at work and even offering to transfer another employee to PR Team 2. When Yeonwoo gives him the silent treatment, Seokheon suggests she just quit, admitting he hates seeing her work under others. He even holds her hand, trying to smooth things over about his sudden marriage proposal, saying he's willing to wait until she's ready. At Grandpa's house, a woman gives Yeonwoo a strange look as she leads them to the dining room. Grandpa's thrilled to see his grandkids, gushing about some fancy yellowtail from Jeju Island that made him think of Yeonwoo. The woman chimes in, encouraging Yeonwoo to visit more often, but Grandpa's understanding about her work schedule. He tells Seokheon to always look out for Yeonwoo like a little sister, but Seokheon's not having it, insisting she's not his sister. Grandpa reminds them of their introduction 8 years ago and how they've been through tough times together, so they should have a sibling-like bond by now. Yeonwoo changes the subject, mentioning how exhausted she always is after work. Grandpa offers to send her some herbal medicine, like the kind that helped her cope with her own grandfather's passing. Yeonwoo politely declines, saying she's not a fan of bitter things. Grandpa affectionately calls her the baby of the family, wondering how he'll ever marry her off. Later, the woman tells Seokheon that Grandpa's been eager to find him a good match, suggesting the daughter of Sungwon Bank's president. Seokheon says his mom's side of the family won't be thrilled about that, but he'll handle it himself. When Grandpa asks if he's seeing someone, Seokheon drops a bombshell by saying yes, much to Yeonwoo's surprise. That night, as Yeonwoo's getting ready for bed and planning to have breakfast with Grandpa before work, she gets a text from Seokheon summoning her to his room. He pulls her close, asking if she saw the orchid garden Grandpa started growing again last fall, filled with the species her own grandfather bred. Seokheon wants to expand the garden next spring, even though he hates orchids, just to see Yeonwoo smile. He imagines their future children watching her tend to the orchids, and when Yeonwoo points out he doesn't like kids either, Seokheon says there's only one person who hates their own children, his father. Seokheon gets all romantic, saying he'll name the expanded orchid garden after Yeonwoo, even though the current one is named after his grandmother. As they start getting intimate, Yeonwoo weakly protests about doing it in Grandpa's house, especially with his room right below them, but Seokheon just tells her to keep quiet. Afterwards, Seokheon walks Yeonwoo back to her room, holding her hand. She asks him to let go at the entrance, and when he does, she notices he forgot his ring on her finger. Seokheon, instead of taking it back, starts planning their future orchid bouquet for next fall. Yeonwoo thinks to herself that she just has to put up with him for 2 more days before she can finally escape for good, wishing their relationship had stayed casual and feelings-free. As soon as Seokheon leaves, the woman, who apparently is Seokheon's stepmother, emerges from her room and summons Yeonwoo. Inside, she stresses the importance of Seokheon's marriage, reminding Yeonwoo of the pressure Bank puts on their family's construction company after Seokheon's mother's suicide. She admits she targeted the Sungwon Bank president's daughter for Seokheon's sake and claims she knew Yeonwoo and Seokheon would end up like this from the moment Grandpa told her to treat Yeonwoo like a daughter. She accuses Yeonwoo of doing whatever it takes to obtain something, given her background, and says her own life has been terrible since Yeonwoo arrived. She begs Yeonwoo to stay out of her life and Seokheon's, sliding an envelope across the table. She says it's more than enough for Yeonwoo to move to a rural area and start her own business, and that she won't ask a second time. The next morning, Yeonwoo heads downstairs to join grandfather and Seokheon for breakfast. The stepmom greets her with a warm smile, inquiring about her night, which makes Yeonwoo marvel at the complete change in her demeanor from the previous evening. The night before, she had interrogated Yeonwoo about her birth control practices, implying that it was despicable to try to hold on to a man with a promising future while being reckless with her body. As always, Yeonwoo's outward reaction to the woman was a far cry from her true feelings. During the meal, grandfather surprises Yeonwoo by announcing his intention to transfer some stocks to her name the following year, once all the tax issues are sorted out. Yeonwoo is taken aback and tries to politely decline, but grandfather insists, believing that he should share his wealth with his children. Yeonwoo is at a loss for words, but the woman deftly changes the subject by inquiring about the soup, much to Yeonwoo's relief. Yeonwoo reminds herself that she only needs to hold out for one more day, and then it will all be over. After breakfast, Yeonwoo bids grandfather farewell with a tight hug, knowing it will be the last time she sees him. Silently, she apologizes for disappointing him. Later at work, Yeonwoo assists her replacement in getting settled in, providing her email address in case she needs any help. As she packs up her desk, she receives a text from Mihyun, questioning her decision to quit. Yeonwoo explains that the job doesn't suit her and that she wants to focus more on her studies. She contemplates whether to say something to Mihyun since she's leaving but ultimately decides against it, realizing that no one knows what Mihyun might say about her once she's gone. Mihyun texts back, skeptical of Yeonwoo's reasons for leaving and mentions spotting her with director Lee. Yeonwoo denies any romantic involvement with the director. Mihyun then admonishes Yeonwoo, urging her not to behave in such a manner in the future, as people like Yeonwoo who bend the rules make those who lead an honest life, like Mihyun, feel cheated. Yeonwoo is irritated by her words, but before she can respond, someone informs her that she has a call from the executive director's office and needs to hurry over. Her heart sinks at the news. Upon arriving at Seokheon's office, he confronts her with her resignation letter, demanding an explanation. He grabs her, accusing her of planning this while he was away in Dubai. She lies, claiming that she wants to take a break and that the work doesn't suit her. Internally, she reminds herself that she's almost there and just needs to keep up the deception a little longer. To make her story more believable, she brings up the topic of marriage, causing him to flinch. She continues spinning her web of lies, expressing her desire to learn to cook, study more, and travel. Seokheon, believing her lies, says she should have informed him earlier. She hides her trembling hands behind her back, explaining that she didn't want to bother him while he was busy with work in Dubai. He offers to buy her a car so she can go wherever she pleases and promises to obtain grandfather's permission for them to get married. She agrees, and he embraces her, thanking her for accepting his proposal. While holding her, he inquires about what she wants to learn and suggests that she move in with him so he can hire a private tutor for her. She agrees to move in after they receive grandfather's blessing. As she's about to leave his office, he hugs her from behind, apologizes for yelling at her earlier, and proposes throwing a party to celebrate her resignation. When she agrees, he kisses her head and expresses his love for her, causing her heart to ache. Yeon was ready to head out from work with her stuff, but Jungmi stops her and hands her a present. It's some lipstick, and Jungmi mentions she wanted to put more thought into it but didn't have much time. Yeonwoo thanks her, and Jungmi tells her to wear the lipstick and send selfies while she's out there traveling. They say their goodbyes, and Yeonwoo leaves the building feeling relieved. Next, Yeonwoo packs her bags and hops on a bus to Suwon. During the ride, she gets a text from Seokheon asking where she is. She fibs, saying she's meeting up with college friends in Itaewon to celebrate quitting her job. He offers to pick her up later, but she tells him to let her enjoy some freedom before they get married and she's on a short leash. He agrees, and she thinks about how breaking up will be tough for a while, but she hopes Seokheon will find happiness in the end. When she reaches her destination, Yeonwoo takes a cab straight to her grandpa's grave. She pours him a cup of alcohol and starts chatting, mentioning she came early this year because she might not make it for the anniversary of his passing. As she pours the alcohol on the grave, she tells him she quit her job so she can live it up before she's too old to enjoy it. The gloomy winter day reminds her of when her grandpa passed away 8 years ago. Flashback to 19-year-old Yeonwoo, reluctantly heading to the study room on a dreary winter day. She spots her grandpa loading up his truck with flowers and questions why he's giving them away to the big shot at Myri Construction instead of selling them. Grandpa explains he sold what he could and is shutting down the moth orchid nursery anyway, so he might as well give them to someone he owes. Yeonwoo notices her grandpa looking bummed about closing up the nursery due to financial troubles. She decides to join him instead of going to study hall, saying it's been a while since she's gotten some fresh soul air. Grandpa asks why she's going to Seoul that day, and she blames it on the gloomy weather. Grandpa mentions he can't keep the greenhouse warm, but the chairman has a heated one at his place. They start talking about the chairman, and Yeonwoo asks if the orchids are named after the chairman's wife, Im-soon. Grandpa confirms and shares how lucky Im-soon was to have such a thoughtful husband who even put a garden in their house just for her. He mentions that even when Im-soon had terminal cancer, she took care of the garden more diligently than the actual gardener. According to what Grandpa heard, Im-soon passed away in her garden in May, surrounded by fully bloomed flowers bearing her name, smiling until her very last moment. Grandpa tells Yeonwoo he'll be driving back and forth like this until she gets into a university in Seoul. Yeonwoo insists she's not going to school in Seoul but will attend a university in Suwon so she can commute from home. Grandpa refuses, saying he needs to see her go to a good school and become successful so he can face her parents in heaven later with pride. Yeonwoo believes that the fact he raised her and provided for her is already enough. She changes the subject to the nursery, hoping he feels better soon since he's sad about it closing. Grandpa asks what he has to be sad about when he has a healthy little treasure like her by his side. Up until that point, she believed there were plenty of happy days ahead of her. When Yeonwoo and her grandpa arrived at the chairman's swanky pad, Grandpa introduced her to the big cheese himself, Chairman Lee Jae-shik of Myri Construction. Yeonwoo was all polite, bowing and greeting Jae-shik respectfully. Jae-shik was impressed with her clear voice and suggested she could totally be a news anchor someday. Yeonwoo was super grateful for the presents he'd sent her and even showed off her cool backpack. Just then, Seokheon's aunt, the chairman's new daughter-in-law, popped out and mentioned she'd got some snacks ready in the living room. Jae-shik invited Yeonwoo and her grandpa to join them for a cup of tea before they got to work, casually introducing the woman as his new daughter-in-law. As the daughter-in-law led the way, Yeonwoo couldn't help but notice how elegant she was. She was also in awe of the chairman's grand house, which made her farmhouse with grandpa look pretty humble in comparison. Later on, Yeonwoo asked the daughter-in-law to point her in the direction of the bathroom. The daughter-in-law obliged, but as Yeonwoo was heading in, she caught the woman's lingering gaze. She didn't think much of it at the time. When she came out, she was surprised to see the daughter-in-law still waiting for her. The woman explained she'd been worried Yeonwoo might get lost, which Yeonwoo found a bit odd since they'd just been having tea in the next room. Still, she thanked the woman for her concern. The daughter-in-law told Yeonwoo to head back to the living room and walked off. Yeonwoo couldn't help but think whoever had this woman as a mom must have been one lucky kid. After tea, Yeonwoo volunteered to help Grandpa carry the moth orchids to the greenhouse. When she laid eyes on the greenhouse, she was totally amazed. Jae-shik double-checked with Grandpa if it was really okay to take the moth orchids, and Grandpa assured him it was, mentioning how much Jae-shik had helped out when the farm was struggling. Jae-shik played it down, saying it was nothing compared to the support Grandpa had provided just before his wife passed away. He admitted he'd been feeling a bit empty looking at the moth orchids, but thanks to Grandpa, his heart was full again. As they were working, Jae-shik couldn't help but watch Yeonwoo helping her grandpa. She turned to him and started sharing some of Grandpa's pest prevention tips. Jae-shik mentioned he was aware of them and that he sometimes received moth orchids as gifts, but they never seemed to be as strong or long-lasting as the ones from her grandpa. Yeonwoo headed off to bring in the remaining flowers, and Jae-shik took the opportunity to tell Mr. Seo that he could see why he was always bragging about his granddaughter. Mr. Seo asked if Seokheon had been discharged from the army yet, which piqued Yeonwoo's curiosity about who this Seokheon guy was. So later on, the daughter-in-law popped into the greenhouse to let Jae-shik know that the food was ready. Jae-shik mentioned they'd eat once they finished up with the last orchid. Yeonwoo offered to head inside and help out, making her way to the house despite Jae-shik pointing out that there were plenty of workers already there. Once inside, she followed the voices of the staff and the daughter-in-law to the kitchen. The daughter-in-law asked if she needed something, and Yeonwoo explained she came to help. The daughter-in-law questioned whether she'd gotten her hands dirty, but Yeonwoo assured her she'd only helped carry things around. The woman then told Yeonwoo to head outside and chat with the grandfathers, smiling in a way that made Yeonwoo feel a bit uneasy. On their way back home, it started to snow, and Yeonwoo commented on how the snow in Seoul didn't stick to the ground like it did back home. Her grandpa asked if she was saying she preferred Seoul and if it meant she wanted to attend university there, but she maintained that she wanted to leave her hometown. He mentioned that he'd heard from her teacher last semester about her interest in majoring in agriculture, and she told him she wanted to start a flower farm just like him. However, he wasn't keen on her pursuing a farming career. He told her that she'd be much better off putting on a glass slipper and working at a company, and that he'd bragged to Chairman Lee about how smart she was. The chairman had even offered to let her live in his house if she got into a school in Seoul. The mention of the chairman's house reminded Yeonwoo of the woman, and she shook her head, refusing to live there and insisting she wasn't going to school in Seoul. Her grandpa laughed and said they'd continue the discussion closer to March. She told him that she was going to take care of him when he got old and frail, live at home, and marry a man from their hometown, and that was final. Later, she fell asleep in the truck, and her grandpa covered her with a blanket before recalling his earlier conversation with Jae-shik. They'd talked about Yeonwoo getting married, with Mr. Seo expressing his desire for her to meet someone reliable and tie the knot. They also discussed her education, and Jae-shik told Mr. Seo not to worry about Yeonwoo's tuition, even offering to have her work at his company. Mr. Seo appreciated the gesture but said Yeonwoo would probably be against it, noting that even if there were easy ways out, she wouldn't take them if they weighed on her conscience. Jae-shik told Mr. Seo that as his friend, he should also be Yeonwoo's grandpa, and Mr. Seo agreed but guessed he'd taught her to live a little too morally. Mr. Seo thought he should have told Yeonwoo to live her life the way she wanted. In a hurry to get home, he ran a red light and crashed into another truck. Yeonwoo woke up and yelled when she saw her grandpa resting on his airbag, bleeding, with half his body stuck. She pounded on the window that wouldn't open, crying and yelling for someone to help her grandpa. Her grandpa opened his eyes, thinking that if he died like that, Yeonwoo would be devastated. With a trembling hand, he reached out to her, telling her not to worry about him, and she told him not to talk, assuring him she already knew what he wanted to say. He called her his Yeonwoo and said he'd be watching over her from above, ensuring that everything worked out in her favor. Then, his hand dropped. Those were her grandpa's last words. Yeonwoo's grandpa's funeral turned into a grand affair, all thanks to Jae-shik's efforts. After the funeral, Jae-shik found a sick Yeonwoo asleep in the back seat of his car. He woke her up and offered her a bottle of water, warning her that she'd die if she kept going like this and that she needed to get through this tough time. He brought her back to his house in Seoul and officially became her guardian. He put her to bed, called for a doctor, and stayed by her side, taking care of her day and night. 3 days later, Yeonwoo sat on the bed, staring blankly into space while Jae-shik tried to coax her to eat. Jae-shik gently reminded her that if she continued like this, her grandpa wouldn't be able to find peace and move on. His words brought tears streaming down her face, and he hugged her, assuring her that he'd be there to make sure she had a good life in place of her grandpa, and that she should lean on him for support. Meanwhile, Jae-shik's daughter-in-law, Jeonggi, watched them with anger, thinking that Jae-shik hadn't shown the same level of care when her own daughter had passed away. Later, Jae-shik called Jeonggi and explained that her daughter's death was due to her weak heart, while Yeonwoo had lost her only relative. He informed her that Yeonwoo would be living with them and that she should think of Yeonwoo as her own daughter. Jeonggi agreed to the arrangement, and Jae-shik also instructed the staff to take care of Yeonwoo, as she was now his granddaughter. Just then, Seokheon entered the room, marking the first time he and Yeonwoo saw each other. Jae-shik introduced Yeonwoo as a new member of the family and told Seokheon to treat her like a little sister. However, Seokheon turned away, and when his grandfather stopped him, he declared that while he didn't care if Jae-shik took Yeonwoo as his granddaughter, she was not his sister. Back in the present, Yeonwoo bids farewell to her grandpa and promises to live a good life, no matter where she goes. She reveals that the reason she decided to leave the chairman's house was that he had shown her so much kindness when she had nowhere else to turn, and she didn't want to disgrace her grandpa's name. Afterward, she heads to the bus station, takes out her SIM card, and discards it. As she boards the bus, she mentally apologizes to everyone she's hurting with her actions. Meanwhile, Seokheon watches the sunset from his apartment, waiting for Yeonwoo. He has a bottle of her favorite wine chilling in ice, with a gift beside it. He checks the time and tries to call her, but the call doesn't go through because her number has been disconnected. Growing increasingly worried, he calls again, but still can't reach her. Panicking, he rushes to her apartment, only to find it being cleaned by some people. He asks one of the cleaners about the woman who lives there, but the cleaner is unsure and explains that the landlord had simply asked them to clean the place for a new tenant. Seokheon leaves the apartment and calls someone, asking if Yeonwoo is at his grandfather's house. They inform him that she hasn't been there since they left the previous day. Returning to his apartment, Seokheon keeps calling Yeonwoo, hoping she'll pick up, but to no avail. He spends the entire night waiting for her, but she neither comes nor takes his calls. By morning, he's forced to accept the fact that she has abandoned him. A few days later, Seokheon's drinking solo, and he just loses it. He smashes his glass, cursing up a storm, and ends up cutting himself in the process. He's calling out for Yeonwoo, all agonized, when his assistant walks in and is like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" The assistant cleans up the broken glass and tends to Seokheon's wound, suggesting he should hit up the hospital. But Seokheon's all, "Nah, I'll be fine." Then he drops the bomb on Ms. Park. Yeonwoo's gone. Ms. Park's jaw nearly hits the floor. Seokheon's determined to bring Yeonwoo back, and when he does, he's gonna ask her why she stomped all over his trust like that. He turns to Ms. Park for advice on what needs to be done. She suggests combing through the CCTV footage of Yeonwoo's apartment building to track her movements. Seokheon's like, "Hire whoever you need, and if you gotta grease some palms, go for it." He clenches his injured hand, telling Ms. Park to do whatever it takes to bring Yeonwoo to him. The next day, Ms. Park rings up Seokheon with some intel on Yeonwoo's whereabouts. Turns out, based on the CCTV footage, Yeonwoo spent a night in Hwaseong, her hometown. After hanging up, Seokheon heads to the bathroom for a shower. Since Yeonwoo left, his desire for her has only gotten stronger, and he ends up taking care of business in the shower, if you know what I mean, while thinking about their intimate moments together. Later, he tells his driver to take him to Hwaseong. At her grandpa's grave, Seokheon calls up Ms. Park, asking if she's dug up anything else on Yeonwoo's location. Ms. Park informs him that Yeonwoo's phone signal has been cut off, and she hasn't withdrawn any cash or used her credit card. Seokheon tells Ms. Park to pay people to find Yeonwoo, no matter the cost. He hangs up, wondering what he did to make Yeonwoo bail. Flashback to when Seokheon was in Dubai, and his grandpa congratulated him over the phone for scoring a tough contract. Gramps promised to reward him when he got back, and Seokheon was like, "Give me the one thing I want." Jae-shik assumed it was the vice president position, but Seokheon had something else in mind. Jae-shik sensed it was important and agreed to give Seokheon whatever he wanted. Back in the present, Seokheon vows never to let Yeonwoo go. Fast forward a month, and we find Yeonwoo stretching her back in the greenhouse of A-Plant, a plant import company in Hanam City, Gyeonggi Province. Her coworker calls out to her, telling her to eat first and reminding her that he told her to leave the heavy lifting to him. He wipes the sweat from her face with his sleeve, but she pushes his hand away, saying she'll clean it herself. He asks why she moved something heavy, and she explains that she thinks the traveler's tree, which she moved, got damaged from the cold. Her coworker scolds her, reminding her that the doctor said she shouldn't lift heavy things during early pregnancy. She touches her belly, referring to her baby as little guy, and says the kid needs to get used to things, and it can't be helped if its mom is the type who carries heavy stuff and works with dirt. Her coworker grabs her hand, urging her to hurry since he already ordered food. She pulls her hand back, saying she's coming, and walks away while he stares at her, feeling a bit down. Later, Yeonwoo and her coworker, Do-kyung, meet up with their friend Sura, who's from Indonesia, and her husband Seokheon at a restaurant. Since leaving Seoul, Yeonwoo's daily life revolves around plants and kind people, making her more comfortable than ever. But when the food arrives, she feels like throwing up. Her morning sickness has been awful, but at least her mind is at peace. Sura notices Yeonwoo, whom she calls Yeonwoo, isn't eating and asks if she's not hungry like other pregnant women who get super ravenous. Yeonwoo says she's not hungry, probably because of the morning sickness. Seokheon encourages her to eat a little for the baby's sake, and Do-kyung places a plate of food in front of her. She tells him he doesn't have to take such good care of her, but he insists, saying that her deposit from 2 years ago saved his business, and he'll never be able to repay her for that. She points out that making her co-owner right after she quit her job was already more than enough. She takes a bite of the food and immediately dashes out of the restaurant to puke. Seokheon tells Do-kyung to go after Yeonwoo, saying that as her boyfriend, he should take good care of her. Do-kyung just agrees. In an alley, Do-kyung rubs Yeonwoo's back as she hurls. When she's done, she tells him she's going back to the greenhouse so he can enjoy his meal without worrying about her. He grabs her hand and leads her to his car, saying they should hit up a nearby cafe for a sandwich. When she starts to decline, he clarifies that he didn't mean her, he just wants to eat one himself. At the cafe, they're served decaf coffee and sandwiches, which Yeonwoo appreciates. Do-kyung asks if she's sure she doesn't want to tell the baby's father about the pregnancy. She puts down her sandwich, saying her relationship with the baby's father has already ended, so she'd rather not tell him. Do-kyung apologizes for bringing up her baby daddy, and she assures him it's okay, then suggests they should head back to work for the afternoon. As he drives them back to the greenhouse, he promises not to ask her uncomfortable questions again and tells her to stay as long as she needs. He adds that he still has to pay her back for her investigation, so he's telling her to exercise her rights and take it easy. 1 month later, at Jae-shik's house, Jae-shik asks Seokheon about Yeonwoo's travels and why she won't turn on her phone. Seokheon had lied to his grandpa, saying Yeonwoo has been traveling, and now he's wondering if 2 months is the limit for using travel as an excuse. Seokheon tells his grandpa that Yeonwoo said she's going to visit other places after Southeast Asia. Jae-shik says he'll relax since Seokheon is looking into Yeonwoo's trip, but his dreams lately have been weird. He says he dreamt a dragon flew into the house, and he's sure it has something to do with Yeonwoo. He thinks the dream means Yeonwoo has met someone decent on her travels, which makes Seokheon scowl. Gyeonggi says Yeonwoo is still a bit immature, But Jae-shik tells her not to say that and wonders how suffocated Yeonwoo must have felt to go on such a long trip without a word. Seokheon starts to leave, and Jeonggi mentions that the head of Hansol law firm wants to meet her and said he'd set him up with someone. Jae-shik, all excited, says the dream might actually be about Seokheon, but Seokheon walks away, saying he's not interested. Seokheon enters an office, thinking that as more time passes, he feels more of his heart burning to ashes. He calls Ms. Park, asking if she's found anything from Yeonwoo's acquaintances yet. She tells him they've been keeping an eye on them for 2 weeks, but none of them seem to be in contact with Yeonwoo. Seokheon slams his fist on the table, causing a yellow diary to fall. Inside the diary, he finds a picture of an orchid, reminding him of his plan to expand the garden. Then he pulls out an old high school picture of Yeonwoo with her friends and her first love. He rips away the part with the first love, Jang Do-kyeong, letting it fall to the ground. He thinks that Do-kyeong was one of the people tied to Yeonwoo and her very dark past. We learn that when Seokheon was 15, he walked into the kitchen and found his mom bawling her eyes out. Turned out, she had just discovered that her husband, Seokheon's dad, had been stepping out on her with some mistress. To make matters worse, this homewrecker had been killing it in her career, all thanks to Seokheon's dad's support. There was even an article about her online, and seeing his mom so devastated, something just snapped inside Seokheon. He wasn't about to let this slide. So, he decided to leave a comment on the article, hoping to expose the ugly truth behind this homewrecker's pretty face. But boy, did that backfire. Seokheon nearly got his butt hauled off to jail, but get this, his dad's mistress actually saved him. She claimed that he was just a kid who didn't know better, so she wouldn't press charges. But then, plot twist. The woman went public with the fact that she was, indeed, Seokheon's dad's mistress. Seokheon's mom, who was already struggling with depression, just couldn't handle it and took her own life. It was a total nightmare. And if that wasn't bad enough, the mistress used her daughter to snag Seokheon's dad in marriage. She moved into the family home, and Seokheon's dad was already moving on to a younger, hotter model. Talk about a messed up situation. From that moment on, Seokheon vowed to keep his emotions on lock and live by the words his mom had once told him. She had said that he needed to become the family's successor and that he was the only thing keeping her going. So, Seokheon put on this mask of indifference, even when he was face to face with Jeonggi, the woman who had basically driven his mom to her death. Fast forward to 26-year-old Seokheon, and 19-year-old Yeonwoo had just moved into the house. One day, she waltzed into his room with a cup of coffee she had been told to give him. She set it down next to his computer, and what did Seokheon do? He straight up poured the coffee into the trash bin, leaving Yeonwoo shocked. She tried to explain that his mom had made it, and that just set Seokheon off. He backed her up against the wall, all menacing, and demanded to know who had said Jeonggi was his mom. Had she said that herself? Yeonwoo stammered, trying to explain that she had just assumed. Seokheon, disgusted by her, told her that it seemed like she could just accept anyone as her grandpa or mom, but he wasn't shallow like her, so it didn't work that way for him. He figured Jeonggi considered herself his mom just because she was legally tied to his dad, and he thought Yeonwoo was fooling herself too, thinking she was part of the family. After kicking Yeonwoo out of his room, Seokheon went back to what he had been doing on his computer, talking stocks with some folks. But in his mind, he was plotting to expose Jeonggi's true colors, no matter what it took. At that point, all he cared about was gaining enough power to kick Jeonggi to the curb with his own 2 hands. One day, Seokheon overheard his grandpa talking to Jeonggi, saying that Yeonwoo was a high school senior and asking if she wasn't being too laid back about it. Grandpa pointed out that if Yeonwoo had been Sujin, Jeonggi's daughter who had passed away, Jeonggi wouldn't have been so chill about it. Jeonggi apologized, and Grandpa reminded her that it hadn't been easy for him to accept her and her daughter at first, so she should accept Yeonwoo wholeheartedly. He told her to meet with an academic coordinator and figure out a plan to get Yeonwoo into the same university as Seokheon. Jeonggi left Grandpa's office and nearly jumped out of her skin when she saw Seokheon standing there. For the first time, Seokheon saw her mask crack, and it hit him. There was someone who could get under Jeonggi's skin, and that someone was Yeonwoo. So, he decided to put it to the test. Later, as he was about to head off to school, he told his grandpa that he was thinking about becoming Yeonwoo's tutor. Grandpa was all for it, saying it would be great to have the siblings study together. A year after Jeonggi tied the knot with Seokheon's dad, her daughter tragically passed away due to an illness. When Jae-shik asked her to think of Yeonwoo as a replacement for her own daughter, Jeonggi just wasn't having it. That's when Seokheon got this brilliant idea to start treating Yeonwoo like his actual sibling, just to rub it in Jeonggi's face. He started helping Yeonwoo with her studies, and that's when he realized that this girl was one smart cookie. Whenever she got something right, he'd give her a little pat on the shoulders as a reward. One day, during lunch, Seokheon was totally bragging to his grandpa about what an amazing student Yeonwoo was, saying she was definitely going to crush the Korean college scholastic ability test. Hearing all this praise, Jae-shik couldn't help but sing Yeonwoo's praises too, which, of course, got under Jeonggi's skin. See, back when Jeonggi's daughter was alive, Seokheon treated her like garbage, so seeing him pretend to be all buddy-buddy with Yeonwoo now was like a knife twisting in Jeonggi's gut. Seokheon gave Yeonwoo a little pat on the head, telling her to finish up her homework because he was heading out for a swim. Just as he was about to leave, he asked Yeonwoo if she knew how to swim, mentioning that Grandpa liked to go fishing on his yacht sometimes, so if she wanted to tag along, she'd better learn. Jae-shik, always the matchmaker, suggested that Seokheon should teach Yeonwoo how to swim. So, Seokheon grabbed her hand and told her to come with him. He spent the entire summer vacation glued to Yeonwoo's side, and every time his stepmom caught a glimpse of them together, she'd shoot them these icy glares. But the more she glared, the more Seokheon doted on Yeonwoo. One day, out of the blue, Seokheon bought Yeonwoo a swimsuit, even though she hadn't asked for one. Jae-shik couldn't help but point out that it was the first time he'd ever seen Seokheon buy a gift for anyone. Not wanting to be outdone, Seokheon handed his grandpa a tie, saying he got it for him because he only ever wore the ones his wife picked out. Jae-shik was touched by the gesture and promised to wear the tie to a meeting the next day. Meanwhile, Jeonggi just sat there, shooting daggers with her eyes, and Seokheon couldn't wait for the day her mask would crack again. Another day, Seokheon spotted Yeonwoo walking home from school with her friends, who were grilling her about what her parents did for a living, since they'd just heard that the chairman of Myri Construction was her guardian. Before Yeonwoo could answer, Seokheon swooped in like a knight in shining armor, placing his hand on her shoulder like a loving brother. He spun this tale to her friends, saying her parents worked in the bio industry and had just moved their business overseas, so Yeonwoo was crashing with his family for her senior year. Then he offered to give Yeonwoo a ride home. As they were driving, Yeonwoo pointed out that her family didn't work in the bio industry, and Seokheon was like, "Yeah, I know your grandpa was a farmer." Then, with this icy tone, he asked if it bothered her that he'd lied to her friends, saying he couldn't exactly tell them that the chairman of Myri Construction had taken in a farmer's kid because of some flowers he liked. He asked Yeonwoo if he was wrong, and she just said no, looking all down in the dumps. See, whenever it was just the two of them, Seokheon didn't bother putting on the nice guy act, because to him, she was just a stranger. That day, he thought it might be a good idea to find her weakness too, just in case. In mid-November that year, Yeonwoo got accepted into Jangkook University's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences through early admission, which put an end to their tutoring sessions without Seokheon discovering her weakness. But he wasn't about to give up that easily. Then, one day, opportunity came knocking. He caught Dokyeon confessing his feelings to Yeonwoo. She accepted, and they shared a kiss. That's when Seokheon decided to crash the party, asking what they were up to. So Seokheon pulled Yeonwoo closer to him, repeating his question like a broken record. Dokyeong tried to explain, but Seokheon wasn't having it. He told the poor guy to get lost and dragged Yeonwoo inside. Jeonggi had this smug smile on her face when she saw them, but they just ignored her. Seokheon hauled Yeonwoo into an office and showed her some juicy CCTV footage of her and Dokyeong getting cozy. Yeonwoo tried to block the screen with her body, but it was too late. Seokheon started reminiscing about his high school days, saying that if any girls came near the house because of him, his grandpa would throw a fit. The old man was always going on about how kids shouldn't be wasting their time with dating. Then Seokheon dropped a bombshell, telling Yeonwoo that she did something really interesting. Yeonwoo, all flustered, apologized profusely. Seokheon forced her to look at the screen and then laid down the law. She swore up and down that it would never happen again, begging him to turn a blind eye. Seokheon, being the sly fox he was, told her that since she did something that Grandpa didn't like, she should do something he would like to make up for it. Yeonwoo, desperate to get out of this mess, nodded in agreement. That evening, as they were chowing down on dinner, Seokheon gave Yeonwoo a little nudge, signaling her to do what he asked. Earlier, he had told her that if she followed his orders, he would pretend like the whole incident never happened and erase the CCTV footage so no one would see it. So, Yeonwoo locked eyes with Jeonggi and called her mother, just like Seokheon had requested. Jae-shik nearly choked on his food, and Jeonggi looked like she had seen a ghost. Yeonwoo, putting on her best act, said that since she had grown up without a mother, she had always wanted to call Jeonggi mom whenever she saw her. Jae-shik, always the optimist, told Jeonggi that this was the perfect opportunity for her to finally accept Yeonwoo as her daughter. But Jeonggi was having none of it. She shot up from her chair, yelling like a banshee. She started ranting about how her own daughter had never been allowed to use words like grandfather and brother. When Jeonggi's daughter couldn't get into a high school affiliated with Hankook University, Jae-shik had told her that she was a disappointment. Jae-shik, not one to be outdone, yelled at Jeonggi to sit down, banging his hand on the table for emphasis. Jeonggi shot Yeonwoo a death glare and then stormed off. Seokheon, the puppet master, kicked Yeonwoo under the table. She called out to Jeonggi, asking if she didn't want to be called mom. Jeonggi lost it, screaming that she was not her mom and that Yeonwoo had been getting on her nerves ever since she moved in. She couldn't stand watching Yeonwoo try to replace her daughter, Sujin. Jae-shik, furious, called Jeonggi a wicked woman and asked how she could feel that way towards a child who had done nothing wrong. He laid into her with some harsh words and told her not to dare show her face around him anymore. Meanwhile, Seokheon just sat there, innocently slurping his soup. After that fateful day, Jeonggi started popping antidepressants like candy. The woman who had caused Seokheon's mother to die from depression ended up losing her own marbles. Their once peaceful home sank into a period of coldness once again, and that winter, Seokheon, having achieved his goal, jetted off to the US to prepare for his succession. After Seokheon jetted off to work at an investment company in the US, the rift between Jae-shik and Jeonggi got even worse, and poor Yeonwoo was stuck in the middle of their drama. It left her feeling suffocated and drained day by day. The second Yeonwoo graduated from college, she packed her bags and moved out. That same summer, 31-year-old Seokheon made his grand return home. Jae-shik welcomed him with open arms, while Jeonggi just glared daggers at him. The atmosphere in the house was still as frosty as when he left, which secretly made Seokheon pretty darn happy. He asked about Yeonwoo, and Jae-shik dropped the bomb that she had moved out earlier that spring. Seokheon was floored. Then, Jae-shik shoved some food into his hands and told him to go check on Yeonwoo. When Seokheon showed up at Yeonwoo's apartment, she was like, "What the heck are you doing here?" But before she could say anything else, he barged right in. He looked around her messy apartment and wrinkled his nose in disapproval. Yeonwoo started yelling, demanding to know why he was there. He held up the lunchbox and told her he brought food, but since Jeonggi made it, if she died after eating it, it wasn't on him. He yanked open her curtain and asked her what she had been up to lately. She told him she was working part-time while hunting for a full-time gig. When he pressed for details about her part-time job, she snapped that it was none of his business. He looked around her apartment again and thought it didn't seem like the place of someone who was out working all the time. He suggested that if she wanted a cushy life, she should have just opened a cafe or something, and he would have bankrolled it for her. She asked him why he would do that and accused him of feeling obligated to help her after using her to stir up drama with Jeonggi. She told him straight up that she had always disliked him and hated the way he would look at her like he was degrading her. He retorted that it wasn't as if he was degrading her, he actually was. When she yelled at him, saying it wasn't something to be proud of, he left the house, claiming he had delivered the food and checked on her. After he left, she screamed that he should never come back again. But lo and behold, the very next day, he showed up again. She asked if their grandfather had sent him, but he said no and started tidying up her apartment. The only reason he came to see her again was because he felt indebted to her. When he finished cleaning, he picked up her phone, and when she tried to snatch it back, he held it above her head and started snooping through it. He saw some messages between her and her boss at the cafe where she worked part-time. Then, he had the audacity to call her boss, claiming he was Yeonwoo's guardian and telling him she wouldn't be working at the cafe anymore. She grabbed the phone from him, but he snatched it right back. She started yelling, asking why he was butting into her life again when she had already done everything he asked her to do. He pointed out that she looked pale from not getting enough sleep and announced that he would come to her apartment every day until she became a decent human being again. He said he understood that she wanted to live freely after becoming independent, and he hoped she was doing okay. As he left her apartment, he told her that if she went back to the cafe, he would drag her home himself. So from that day on, Seokheon made it his mission to show up at Yeonwoo's apartment every single day. If she didn't open the door for him, he would just keep ringing that doorbell until she had no choice but to let him in. And once he was inside, oh boy, he would nag her to no end. One day, Yeonwoo got so fed up that she threatened to hide somewhere he would never find her if he kept coming around. But Seokheon, being the cocky guy he was, dared her to try it. The next day, he waltzed in like he owned the place, announcing that he was going to live with her from now on and that she should focus on her studies. Yeonwoo was absolutely floored. When she asked him what the heck he meant, he plopped some books down on the table and told her she should apply for Myri Construction's next recruitment drive. Yeonwoo couldn't believe it. It seemed like he still saw her as the high school kid he used to tutor. Seokheon retorted that she was even worse than she was back then and asked for her GPA. When she told him she had a 4.01, he said that just being from Hankook University put her ahead of half the competition, so she had a pretty good shot at landing the job. But Yeonwoo wasn't having it. She told him straight up that she wasn't going to apply. That's when Seokheon dropped a bombshell. He had heard that her grandpa's dream was to see her work at a major company. Yeonwoo countered, saying that her grandpa's real dream was for her to have a good life. Seokheon wasn't backing down, though. He told her that an industrial complex was supposed to be built on her grandpa's farm, but his grandfather had put a stop to it. Jae-shik knew about Yeonwoo's dream of having an orchid garden someday, so he met with the project planners at City Hall and cut a deal with them, which cost him a pretty penny. The industrial complex got moved to the next town over, and Yeonwoo's town would only have a few subcontractors. Seokheon told her that just based on what his grandfather had done for her, she should work at Myri Construction for at least 5 years. When she asked why 5 years specifically, he said that by then, his grandfather would start seeing her as an adult instead of some poor kid. And to sweeten the deal, he promised to build her dream farm for her after those 5 years were up. Yeonwoo asked if that was his way of compensating her for using her, and he said yes. That was enough to convince her to apply for the job at Myri Construction. A few days later, they were having lunch at a nearby restaurant, where they had been eating twice a day since Yeonwoo started hitting the books. When she mentioned that to Seokheon, he asked if she was sick of the place. She said no, but pointed out that the aptitude test wasn't something she needed to build her stamina up for. He told her to quit complaining and passed her a book, saying that if she didn't want to be accused of getting the job through nepotism, she better work her butt off. So, she chowed down on her food while he just sat there, staring at her. On the day of the interview, Yeonwoo got all dolled up in her best suit. As she was about to head out, she noticed a note from Seokheon that said, "I will kill you if you don't get in," along with a lunchbox full of traditional Korean taffy, which she absolutely hated. She showed up at the company an hour early, and as she walked into the building, she spotted Seokheon and his secretary strolling by. Seokheon noticed her too and told his secretary that they should hit up the lobby for some coffee. He handed his secretary his credit card and asked if that day was the company's aptitude test. Then, he told the secretary to buy the early bird applicant a sandwich and coffee, but he shouldn't let her know that it was Seokheon who bought it. The secretary found Yeonwoo and told her that he admired seeing her working so hard, so he wanted to offer her a little snack. She thanked him and accepted the food, and then Seokheon flashed her a smile. She smiled back and happily munched on her lunch. A week after the interview, Yeonwoo got this email from Myri Construction that had her jumping for joy. It was, "Congratulations, you passed the second round of our open recruitment." She was feeling pretty darn proud of herself. She told Seokheon the good news and then asked him how long he was planning on mooching off her in her apartment and when he was gonna hit the road. But instead of answering her questions, he hit her with a curveball and asked if she wasn't going to take a shower. When she said she already did, he told her to follow him. Yeonwoo was like, "Don't you have work?" But Seokheon was all, "Nah, I got a special leave for the day, courtesy of the big boss. And since you passed the aptitude test, Gramps wants me to get you some clothes. He won't let me go to work until I do." Then he asked her what kind of photo she used for her application. When she asked why he was so curious, he told her that Grandpa nearly had a heart attack when he saw her application. Apparently, Jae-shik threatened to murder Seokheon if Yeonwoo showed up to the interview looking shabby. Yeonwoo blushed, feeling a bit embarrassed, and admitted that she just wore whatever she had since she wasn't really looking for a job in the first place. She decided to go change and follow Seokheon, but he told her not to bother. First stop, a fancy schmancy salon to get her hair and makeup done for the interview. The stylist told her she would show her 2 different looks, and she had until the day of the interview to pick her favorite. Then the stylist asked if she wanted her hair neatly tied up or left down, and Seokheon chimed in, saying it should be tied up. When the stylist left to get things ready, Yeonwoo commented that the salon must be making bank since the stylist was super famous. Seokheon, being his arrogant self, told her that he had always been loaded, which she already knew. But she thought he had been spending a lot lately. He assured her that even if he spent a lot, it wouldn't make a dent, so she shouldn't worry about it. That made her say she was going to spend as much as she wanted. When she was all done, she asked him if it was worth the money. He said he guessed his grandpa had gotten old because he was wasting money on useless things. She reminded him that he said it was his money, but he clarified that he said it wouldn't make a dent, not whose bank account it was. She countered that if he had told her whose money it was, she wouldn't have spent so much, but he didn't seem to mind. Next stop, a boutique, where he told her he would be paying with his own money and that she should pick out some suits for work. She told him that she hadn't even passed the final round yet, but he was all, "Unless you slap the interviewer, there's no way they won't accept you." After shopping to her heart's content, Seokheon paid, making the staff swoon and Yeonwoo annoyed. A month later, she got the good news she was in at Myri Construction. And just like that, Seokheon moved out immediately after she got accepted. She reflected on the 2 months they spent together and felt a little sad that he was gone. But she brightened up, grabbed her suitcase, and headed off for the recruit training for her first real job. It was the last day of Myri Construction's new recruit training retreat, and it just so happened to be a fitness day. Yeonwoo wasn't exactly thrilled about it because, let's face it, she wasn't exactly the athletic type. Anyway, two of her female colleagues started chatting her up, asking if she'd heard about this director Lee Seokheon guy. Yeonwoo, being the sly fox she was, decided to play dumb and told them she had no idea who he was. The girls were all excited, telling her that they'd heard he was going to be there to give a congratulatory speech. Yeonwoo figured he was only showing up because he was the youngest of all the executives, and she seriously doubted he'd actually be at the auditorium. The girls started grilling Yeonwoo about which day she did her interview, and when she said it was the second day, they were like, "Oh, Director Lee must have been one of the interviewers that day." But Yeonwoo was all, "Nah, I had the senior executive director and head manager interviewing me." One of the girls piped up, saying that Director Lee was there on the third day when she interviewed, and it was like there was this halo shining around him. The other girl complimented her friend's lipstick, asking where she got it. The girl with the pretty lipstick admitted she wore it because she'd heard Director Lee was coming, but she wasn't the only one who'd put in some extra effort on her appearance that day. Suddenly, it all clicked for Yeonwoo. She finally understood why everyone was looking so sharp when they usually looked like zombies with dark circles under their eyes. The girls pointed out that Taewon, the guy who'd been acing every test on the retreat, had his hair slicked back. They figured he was trying to catch the director's eye, and if he got into the project team and delivered good results, he'd be on the fast track to a promotion. One of the girls confessed that all she wanted was to see Director Lee up close. Yeonwoo thought to herself that even if there was a whole truckload of guys like Seokheon, she'd still pass. The girls started quizzing Yeonwoo on what she thought of attractive, successful guys like Director Lee, with his broad shoulders and biceps that you could make out even through his suit jacket. Yeonwoo was all, "Nah, I'm not into buff guys." The girls were confused, like, "Wait, how do you know he's buff if you've never seen him before?" Yeonwoo quickly covered, saying that based on their description, he sounded pretty muscular. She breathed a sigh of relief when they bought her story. But then she started thinking back to the time she saw him shirtless, and she couldn't help but blush. Fast forward to the big moment, and everyone was gathered to hear Seokheon's congratulatory speech. As he was talking, Yeonwoo wondered if his voice had always been so dignified and if all these successor-in-training types had multiple personas like Seokheon. He locked eyes with her and flashed a smile, and her heart started racing. When it was time for the games, Yeonwoo decided to run the relay race instead of playing volleyball. Seokheon spotted her chatting with a male colleague about the relay and wondered what the heck she was doing there when she wasn't even athletic. The guy he was talking to noticed he wasn't paying attention and asked what he was staring at. Seokheon was all, "Are the new recruits always this friendly with each other?" The guy told him yeah, colleagues should get plenty of chances to work together, which was why they packed in so many activities. Seokheon watched as the guy with Yeonwoo held her hand and then started massaging her shoulders. He coldly said that he saw what was going on. When the race started, the baton got passed to Yeonwoo, and everyone started chanting her name as she ran. But nobody noticed the bottle that rolled onto the track. Yeonwoo kicked the bottle and twisted her ankle, sending her tumbling to the ground. Seokheon, who saw the whole thing go down, yelled out her name. Seokheon literally pushed through the crowd to get to Yeonwoo, and then he held her as he asked if she could stand. She told him she couldn't, and he took a look at her ankle, which was all swollen. Without hesitation, he scooped her up into his arms and called for his driver to take them to the hospital. On the way there, he started yelling at Yeonwoo for running when she sucked at sports. She fired back, telling him that corporate life was like that, something he wouldn't know since he was above everyone else. He told his driver to take them to Hankook University Hospital, not some local joint, and then he put her legs on his lap while she protested. He told her to shut up and stay still, then placed a cold water bottle on her swollen ankle. After they got discharged from the hospital, he took her back to his apartment, still giving her an earful for participating in the race. She suddenly remembered that her stuff was still at the retreat, but he assured her that he had already told his manager to pick everything up the next day. She said she would go back to her apartment and get some rest, but he wasn't having it. He insisted that she stay at his place and enjoy what his housekeeper had cooked for her. When she tried to argue with him, he coldly told her that he wasn't going to repeat himself and that she should stay while he was telling her nicely. That made her agree to stay. She thought that her colleagues must be worried about her and decided to send a message. She took a step while telling Seokheon that she needed to use his computer, and then she stumbled. He caught her and yelled, asking if he had to do everything for her. She yelled back, saying she never asked him for help. When they both calmed down, he asked her why she needed a computer, and when she told him, he remembered the male colleague massaging her shoulders and her kiss with Seokheon. Then he started yelling at her, saying that if she only joined the company to date, she should just quit and that he couldn't stand such a thing. She yelled back, asking him where he got that idea from, and said that she was closer to her female colleagues than the male ones. Then he told her that she should try doing something foolish and see if he would let her get away with it. She told him that it was obvious he was trying to be an older brother who wouldn't let his younger sister date anyone, and he told her that he never once thought of her as family, which made her angry. She declared that she was going home, and when she still insisted on going despite him telling her to stay, he lifted her onto his shoulders. She yelled at him, asking what he was doing while he took her to a bedroom and tossed her on the bed. He told her that making someone worry was annoying before walking out of the room, and she yelled that no one told him to worry about her. The next day, Yeonwoo was chatting with her colleagues about her accident, and then the conversation took a juicy turn towards Seokheon. They started gushing over him, his thighs, and his butt, which made Yeonwoo blush like crazy. They also couldn't stop talking about how he swooped in and carried Yeonwoo after her accident, saying she was one lucky girl. Just then, Seokheon, who was rocking a robe, waltzed into the room and asked her what she was looking at. She quickly hid the screen, telling him to mind his own business, but he wasn't having it. He tried to snatch the tablet from her, and they ended up in this hilarious struggle, with her trying to keep it away from him. Somehow, during their little tug-of-war, she caught a glimpse of his bare chest, which made her blush even harder. She yelled at him, saying his open robe was creeping her out. As they kept wrestling for the tablet, she made eye contact with his chest again and called him a creep. He finally managed to grab the tablet from her, read the messages, and then type something with this smirk on his face before handing it back to her and leaving the room. She picked it up and saw that he had written, "Same here, I think Director Lee is cool," with a ton of heart emojis. Her colleagues started asking if she had fallen for Director Lee too, and she yelled, saying he had ruined her reputation. Later that day at the office, Seokheon was going through the profile of the guy who had massaged Yeonwoo during the retreat. He found out the guy's name was Lee Kyeong and told Ms. Park that he wanted to have a meeting with him. Then he hung up with this mischievous smile on his face. A few days later, Yeonwoo got a message from Myri saying that her assignment of position had been postponed due to her injury, which she totally understood. She thought it was great that it was postponed because she had been assigned to a team, and she wouldn't have been able to report to work, which would have made her feel awful towards her colleagues. She agreed to stay with Seokheon until her leg healed, but at some point, she got used to living with him. He had given her his room since it was hard for her to move around, while he took the guest bedroom, which had a much smaller bed. Seokheon arrived home just as Yeonwoo got a text message from Kyeong. In the message, he told her that he had been assigned to the director's office and promised to buy her lunch or dinner when she went back to work. Seokheon, who had been complaining about her being too busy to notice when someone walked in, saw the message and immediately stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. That night, as he was about to go to bed, he heard the sound of sirens and then Yeonwoo screaming. He rushed into her room and found her curled up in bed, trembling with a pillow over her head, while the sirens continued to blare. He held her and asked her what was wrong, but she just stared blankly. When she didn't answer, he hugged her tightly, still urging her to tell him what was going on. She managed to say through a lot of pain that her back was burning. He lifted up her shirt and was shocked to see that her back was covered in scars. He asked her what they were, but instead of answering, she said she was scared. A voice from the speakers apologized to the residents for the alarm, saying there was a malfunction in the fire alarm system, which was what had caused the sirens. Meanwhile, Yeonwoo clung to Seokheon, telling him her back was burning so much. According to what Seokheon dug up on the internet, Yeonwoo lost both her parents in a fire when she was just 4 years old. She managed to survive thanks to the sacrifices her mother made, but she was left with some serious burns on her back. The poor girl had to go through multiple skin grafts and treatment for trauma. Seokheon held her, thinking he had no idea her trauma was that serious, while she pleaded with him to make it stop. She told him it felt like there was fire on her back, which confused him because her back didn't actually feel hot. He laid her on the bed and went to grab an ice pack. When he got back, he iced her back while she cried. He thought to himself that he had no grasp of the emotions she was going through and no idea how to alleviate the burning sensation she was describing. No matter how much he tried to cool her back, she couldn't pull herself together. So, he helped her while caressing her hair and whispering that everything was fine until they both conked out. An hour later, he woke up still holding her, and it hit him that he felt bad for her, which totally shocked him. He wondered why he felt bad and took care of Yeonwoo in the first place. Then, he had this realization that made his heart start beating faster and his face turn red. He thought that he should have ignored Yeonwoo from the start so he wouldn't ever feel the way he did. He finally understood why he felt so annoyed seeing her with Kyeong, which was the same way he felt when he saw her with Dokyeong. But back then, he held that over her head to cause chaos because he hated Jeonggi. However, he admitted to himself that he also acted that way because of his rage towards Yeonwoo for being intimate with another guy. He hated the idea of someone taking a cherished spot in Yeonwoo's heart. Every part of him became aware that his desires could only be fulfilled by having Yeonwoo all to himself. In the morning, Yeonwoo woke up surprised to see Seokheon in bed with her and her shirt pulled up. She was like, "What the heck is going on here?" She woke him up and asked him why he was sleeping there. He stared at her, realizing he didn't remember what happened the previous night, and told her that she was screaming because of a nightmare. So, when he came to check on her, she asked him to hold her, which totally caught her off guard. Then he told her that he was taking her to the hospital for her back, and when she said she was fine, he told her that it didn't seem like she did anything to her scars after her surgery. He left the room, telling her to get dressed, and she blushed while her heart raced faster as she wondered if she really told him to hold her the previous night. At the hospital, the doctor told her that the parts around where she had sutures had risen up and become keloid scars, which could become a problem if they continued to rise and spread to her healthy skin. As she talked to the doctor, she was very aware of Seokheon staring at her, which made her feel uncomfortable. The doctor gave her some injections in the scars, which hurt like hell, but Seokheon held her hand, surprising her. Then the doctor gave her an ointment to apply on the scars regularly and told her that with long-term treatment, her scars would fade much more than they already had. On their way back home, Seokheon told her that she should have told him or grandfather about her symptoms, and she reminded him that he didn't care about her, which was why she didn't say anything. Her answer seemed to frustrate him, and she wondered if he was actually worried about her. Then she told herself that even if he was acting friendly, she shouldn't lose her cool. An hour later at the house, Seokheon told her to pull her shirt up so he could apply the ointment for her. She refused, saying she could do it herself, but he argued that she was so stiff that she wouldn't be able to reach her back properly. She thought about what he said and blushed in embarrassment. So Yeonwoo turned her back to Seokheon and took off her shirt, all the while telling herself that he was just applying some ointment, no biggie. She covered her front with her shirt, trying to keep things PG. But as soon as Seokheon started rubbing that ointment on her back, she couldn't help but shiver. And when his hand started wandering lower, she let out this involuntary sound that made her blush so hard she could have passed for a tomato. Seokheon, being the smooth operator he is, called her name, and she immediately told him to hit the brakes and that she could handle the ointment situation herself. He asked her why and if he was offending her. But before she could even get a word out, he was hugging her from behind and planting a kiss on her head. He spun her around to face him, noticing that she was blushing like crazy and her breath was getting all heavy. He thought to himself that he always got what he wanted, and this time wouldn't be any different. Yeonwoo was going to be his. He went in for a kiss, thinking that he finally understood why he had wanted to make her cry before, and that it all stemmed from his own selfish desire. They broke off the kiss and just stared at each other, but when he leaned in for round 2, she slapped her hand over his mouth and told him to cool it. He grabbed her hand, which made her blush even harder, and then he nipped her finger, making her close her eyes. He told her that if she didn't open her eyes, he was going to start munching on every inch of her, and then he kissed her palm. She finally opened her eyes and said that they shouldn't be doing this, but he just pulled her closer. He stroked her back, thinking this was his chance to make her stop resisting him. He asked if all that talk about them being siblings was just her way of denying her true feelings, and said that they had never acted like siblings anyway. He pointed out that her gaze always wavered whenever she looked at him. He also said that the way she watched him was definitely not like a younger sister at all, and that she saw him as a man. He kissed her again and said he would take responsibility. She thought about it and realized that everything he said was spot on, and that they had always been walking on thin ice. He asked for her consent, and after hesitating for a bit, she said okay. He laid her down on the bed, and as she lay there, she started thinking about how Grandpa had treated her when she was sick, which made her wonder if what they were doing was all right. She looked away from Seokheon, thinking she was making a mistake, but he told her not to look away because he didn't want her to miss a single moment, thinking that if he had to treat Yeonwoo as family, then he would only do so as his woman, not his sister. Fast forward to the present, and Yeonwoo's heading to the hospital, enjoying the sight of the pretty flowers, when Seokheon pulls up behind her. She asks him what he's doing there, and he tells her that he's going to take her to see the obstetrician. He gets into his car as she asks about work, and he replies that he's playing hooky. She reminds him that he's got a ton of stuff to do to get ready for the online shop, but he tells her that no matter how busy he is, he can always make time to take her to the hospital. Then he asks if she wants to be the one to manage the online stuff, including all the money they'll make. She asks him why he trusts her so much, and he counters by asking what made her trust him enough to invest 200 million into his business. He tells her that he's willing to do anything for her. She notices that he's not taking the usual route to the doctor's office, and he explains that he found a new clinic with a nice, clean postpartum care center. Yeonwoo hadn't gotten a proper checkup since she found out she was pregnant because she was worried they would keep a record of her name, which could be used to track her down. She figures Seokheon must have given up trying to find her since it's been 4 months. Her belly has already started to show, so she can't keep avoiding getting checked any longer. When she sees the doctor, he asks if she's planning on having the baby and says that they don't do terminations at the clinic. She tells him that she's going to have the baby on her own and that she's going to take responsibility for it no matter what. Yeonwoo lets him know she's got the money and responsibility on lock. The doctor nods, assuring her there's no need to worry. He covers her medical stuff and the vitamins she needs to take. Then, he commends her bravery for tackling this whole baby thing solo, promising to be there for her every step of the way. During the ultrasound, they discover the baby's in perfect shape, heart thumping away. Oh, and get this, it's a boy. Yeon was caught off guard in the best way possible. Fast forward, Do-kyung's behind the wheel, driving Yeonwoo home as she's practically bursting at the seams with excitement. She gushes about her healthy baby boy and the adorable nickname she wants to give him. Do-kyung encourages her, telling her to keep him in the loop when she lands on the perfect one. Yeonwoo's mind is already racing, dreaming up something that'll be music to everyone's ears. Meanwhile, over at Seokheon's office, his assistant Yoonseon takes a call that has her grinning from ear to ear. Kaeong, the guy beside her, wonders if it's about Yeonwoo. Yoonseon confirms they might have a lead on her whereabouts. She makes a beeline for Seokheon's office, spilling the tea about Yeonwoo's recent visit to an OBGYN in Hanam. Seokheon's on his feet in an instant, worried Yeonwoo might be under the weather. He demands his car, ready to hit the road. Back in Do-kyung's ride, he's suggesting they grab a bite, but Yeonwoo's lost in the ultrasound pic, insisting they should head back to work. Do-kyung's not having it, firmly putting her well-being first. Yeonwoo levels with him, explaining that a romantic entanglement between them is a no-go, given his big-shot business owner status and her being a single mom. Do-kyung assures her he's just repaying a debt and down to play the cool uncle role, promising not to cross any lines. Yeon was relieved but mentions she's feeling a bit weighed down. Do-kyung proposes a mall pit stop for some grub, his treat, to celebrate finding out the baby's gender. After they chow down, Do-kyung's all about copping some baby kicks, but Yeonwoo reminds him they've got half a year to go. Do-kyung's not one to give up easily, determined to snag a hat or socks to commemorate the day. At the baby store, Do-kyung's on the hunt for hats and clothes. The storekeeper assumes they're hitched, but Do-kyung's quick to set the record straight they're just pals. Yeonwoo clocks the steep prices and tells Do-kyung he doesn't need to spend the dough. But Do-kyung's not backing down, eager to be the first to shower her with a gift. Cut to Seokheon, who's posted up at Yeonwoo's apartment, ringing the bell like there's no tomorrow and calling out her name. Radio silence. He rummages through the mailbox for bills and spots her name. His heart skips a beat, and not in a good way. Seokheon hits up Yoonseon for Yeonwoo's work deets a flower nursery called A Plant near Hanam Highway. When he rolls up, he bumps into Sura, who's tending to the plants. He inquires about Yeonwoo, and Sura fills him in she's the co-owner who just hit the hospital with Do-kyung, the baby daddy. Seokheon's mind is spinning. Did Yeonwoo really dip out on him for her first love? He's seeing red. Right on cue, Do-kyung makes an appearance, and Sura gives him the heads up about the visitor. Seokheon and Do-kyung exchange intense stares. Sura calls Yeonwoo over, and when she lays eyes on Seokheon, she's so shocked she drops her bag. Seokheon's shooting daggers with his eyes. Do-kyung's all worried, checking on Yeonwoo and wondering who this mystery man is. Seokheon makes a grab for Yeonwoo, insisting she come with him. She's not having it, yanking her hand away and leaving him stunned. He gives her an ultimatum: either she comes quietly, or he'll drag her out himself. Do-kyung steps in, shielding Yeonwoo and questioning Seokheon's authority. Seokheon brushes him off but then clocks Yeonwoo's baby bump and recalls what Sura mentioned earlier. He accuses Yeonwoo of playing him and demands she leave with him. Yeonwoo's not backing down, refusing to go anywhere and demanding to know what he means by her deceiving him. Seokheon reminds her of her promise to marry him, in disbelief that she could just vanish like that. Yeonwoo counters, revealing she only agreed because of his relentless pressure, despite her objections. Seokheon argues they've been more intimate than most married folks and once again orders her to come with him. Do-kyung's lost, thinking Seokheon must be Yeonwoo's sibling. Seokheon gets up in Do-kyung's face, scoffing at the brother-sister concept. Do-kyung, still out of the loop, declares that regardless of Seokheon's history with Yeonwoo, she's got Do-kyung's bun in the oven now. He urges Seokheon to quit causing a scene and bounce. Seokheon's floored, asking Do-kyung to run that by him one more time. Do-kyung tells Yeonwoo to head inside, and she obliges, watching the drama unfold from the doorway. Do-kyung slips Seokheon his card, making it clear that any Yeonwoo-related matters go through him, her hubby. As Do-kyung walks away, he's hoping this will be enough to make Seokheon throw in the towel. Oh, how wrong he was. Seokheon, still reeling from the pregnancy bombshell, instructs Yoonseon to take him to a hotel a stone's throw from Yeonwoo's place. Little did anyone know just how far Seokheon would be willing to go, armed with the knowledge that Yeonwoo was carrying another man's child. In the next scene, we see Seokheon holed up in his hotel room, throwing back drinks and stewing over the whole Yeonwoo situation from earlier. He slams his hand on the table, cursing up a storm, wondering if Yeonwoo's really got Do-kyung's bun in the oven and how she could do him dirty like that. Tears start streaming down his face, and he eventually passes out. But get this, a few minutes later, he jolts awake and realizes there's some kind of invisible wall blocking his way. He's totally confused. Out of nowhere, a spotlight shines on Yeonwoo, and Seokheon starts yelling her name, pounding on the invisible barrier, but she can't hear a thing. Then, Do-kyung comes up behind her, all smiles, and she's grinning right back at him, looking all in love. They start gabbing about the gender of their unborn kid, and then, to add insult to injury, Do-kyung plants a big ol' kiss on Yeonwoo. Seokheon's losing his mind, screaming at them to cut it out, but they're not paying him any attention. Yeonwoo turns to him, flashes a smile, and lets Do-kyung start undressing her while he's kissing her all over. They get down to business, getting all intimate, while Seokheon's stuck there, yelling and banging on the barrier, completely helpless. Seokheon snaps out of his nightmare, shook to the core, and swears there's no way he's leaving Yeonwoo with Do-kyung. Meanwhile, over at Yeonwoo's place, she's spilling her guts to Do-kyung about why she ran off. She figured that after 3 months, Seokheon would have moved on and forgotten all about her. Do-kyung notices she's shaking like a leaf and suggests she get some rest for the baby's sake. She agrees, and then drops a bombshell. She wants them to pretend her son is Do-kyung's until Seokheon backs off. Do-kyung's like, unless Seokheon's a total psycho, he's not gonna force her to go with him if he thinks she's pregnant with another dude's kid. Yeonwoo starts to object, but Do-kyung cuts her off, telling her he had this realization after seeing his folks laid up in bed after their business tanked. Until he can get his family back to the way they used to be, marriage isn't even on his radar. He suggests they check out the baby clothes if she's not in the mood to eat. As they're rummaging through the stuff, Do-kyung asks if she's decided on a nickname for the little guy. She says she's gonna call him Hope, and Do-kyung's all for it. Right then, there's this crazy banging on the door, and Seokheon's outside, yelling Yeonwoo's name like a madman. Do-kyung goes to see what's up, but as soon as he opens the door, Seokheon shoves him aside and barges into the apartment. Yeonwoo's shocked as hell. Before Seokheon can get to her, Do-kyung grabs him, yelling, asking what the heck he thinks he's doing to his wife. Seokheon's not having it and pushes Do-kyung so hard he slams into the wall. Yeonwoo rushes over to check on him, telling Seokheon she thought he was better than this. Seokheon snatches Yeonwoo's hand, and Do-kyung grabs his, telling him to knock it off. Seokheon tells Do-kyung to stop acting like he means something to Yeonwoo. Do-kyung fires back, reminding Seokheon that they only listened to him back when they were 19, but they're grown-ups now, with a baby on the way. He asks Seokheon if he's not embarrassed by all this. Seokheon loses it and shoves Do-kyung against the wall, pressing his arm against his throat. When Do-kyung manages to break free, he starts grilling Seokheon. Does he know what Yeonwoo likes to eat when she's tired, her favorite color, her dream, what she drinks at the convenience store? Seokheon socks him in the face, leaving Yeonwoo stunned, but Do-kyung keeps going. He asks if Seokheon's pissed because he doesn't know the answers. Then he lays it all out. Yeonwoo makes egg porridge when she's beat, her favorite color's light yellow, she always grabs plain soda at the convenience store, and her dream is to grow perennial plants that anyone can afford to take care of. Do-kyung starts yelling, telling Seokheon that if it wasn't for him, Yeonwoo would have made her dream come true, living her best life with a man she loves, head held high, instead of hiding out like some criminal. Seokheon's about to blow his top, but Yeonwoo clings to Do-kyung, screaming at Seokheon not to hit him. She shoves Seokheon out of her apartment and slams the door in his face. Yoonseon catches up with Seokheon, and right off the bat, he's asking for a lighter to spark up a cigarette. A few smokes later, Yoonseon drops some intel on him. Turns out, Jang Do-kyung is the son of Jang Se-hwa, the big shot behind A-Plant Import Company. But get this, the company went belly up after getting caught violating some quarantine rules for their imports. Now, Se was barely scraping by, trying to pay off the debt from the whole bankruptcy fiasco. Seokheon's wondering how the heck Dokyong managed to start his own biz when his family's drowning in debt. Yoonseon fills him in. Dokyong got a boost from some entrepreneurship program, but here's the kicker, Yeonwoo threw in a cool 200 million, which she got from selling her old pad. Seokheon's gears are turning now. He knows Yeonwoo wouldn't just throw money at anyone, so he figures Yeonwoo and Dokyong have been scheming behind his back this whole time, playing him for a fool. He tells Yoonseon to round up some muscle he can put to work in the morning, and he's got a plan. He's gonna rip apart everything Yeonwoo and Dokyong have built, right in front of their faces. And then, he's gonna take back what's rightfully his. Fast forward to the next day, and there's a bunch of thugs holding a sobbing Sura while the rest of them are dousing the greenhouse in gasoline. Seokheon's trying to talk some sense into them, telling them that swiping their phones and tying them up is a straight-up crime, but they're not having it. They just keep on pouring that gasoline. Right then, Dokyong shows up, yelling at them to get the hell out, but they're not budging. Instead, they flick a lighter and toss it on the floor. The whole damn greenhouse goes up in flames, and the thugs just bounce, leaving Dokyong and his crew, including Yeonwoo, standing there in shock. Yeonwoo and Sura start screaming for help, while Dokyong and Seokheon try to put out the fire, but it's only getting worse. Minutes later, the firefighters roll up and manage to get the flames under control, but the damage is done. Everything's been turned to ash. As Yeonwoo stares at the charred remains of the greenhouse, all those happy memories from the past 3 months come flooding back. She'd spent that time dreaming of a bright future, and now it's all gone up in smoke. Dokyong collapses to the ground, bawling his eyes out, and Yeonwoo rushes over to comfort him. Sura and Seokheon are holding each other, crying their hearts out too. Yeonwoo's apologizing to Dokyong, thinking that none of this would have happened if she hadn't come running to him in the first place. She's taking all the blame, promising to make things right. Meanwhile, over at the Hanam Hotel, Seokheon's just casually chowing down and working when he gets a text from an unknown number, saying they need to meet up and that there's something they gotta tell him. Then, his phone rings, another unknown number. He picks up, and it's Yeonwoo on the other end, telling him they need to talk. Seokheon's all ears, and Yeonwoo asks him point-blank if he's the one who sent those thugs to wreck the greenhouse. When he admits it, she starts tearing into him for making other people suffer, but he shuts her down, telling her he didn't answer the phone to listen to her whining and threatens to hang up. She backpedals, apologizing, which makes him smirk. Then he lays it out for her. He's not falling for her lies again and says goodbye. She stops him, asking what she can do to make sure he never pulls a stunt like that again. He tells her to pack her bags and haul ass to the hotel, or she can just leave her stuff behind, doesn't matter to him. He gives her an hour to show up. An hour later, almost on the dot, Yeonwoo shows up at Seokheon's hotel room, out of breath. He's all smug, telling her he thought she was gonna stick with Dokyong, throwing in a crude word to describe him. She's apologizing for tricking him into thinking she was gonna marry him and then running away. He's like, yeah, he was ready to forgive her for all that, but then she had to go and invest her money in Dokyong's business. Plus, he's guessing she was seeing Dokyong on the side while she was with him. Yeonwoo swears that she wasn't sneaking around with Dokyong while she was with Seokheon. She explains that she put her money into Dokyong's business because seeing him and his family struggling after their company tanked hit close to home. It reminded her of what happened to her grandpa and her. She's trying to jog Seokheon's memory, asking if he remembers how they used to meet up 4 or 5 times a week. She's like, there's no way she would have had the energy to be constantly traveling back and forth to Hanam because of Dokyong, and he wouldn't have had the time either. Seokheon's not buying it, though. He's convinced that she reconnected with her first love after all this time and got back together with him. Then he asks her if sleeping with Dokyong was better than with him. When she doesn't say anything, he loses it, yelling at her, asking if Seokheon was so damn special that she was ready to toss him aside like. He grabs her face, but she turns away, telling him she has no idea what he wants from her. She can't wrap her head around why he'd go and burn down the nursery. He shoots her a death glare and then shoves her onto the bed. He lays it out for her, if she wants him to do her a solid, she's gotta give him something in return. He starts stripping down, telling her that if she's got nothing else to offer, she better give up her body. She's like, is he for real? Is he really planning on sleeping with her? He tells her that if she's not down, she can hit the road. He points to the door, telling her to get out and that their little negotiation is over. She caves, saying she'll do it, but in exchange, he's gotta pay for all the damage he caused. He makes it clear that he's not doing this for Seokheon's sake, his own investment money is on the line, too, so it all comes down to how well she performs. Yeonwoo thinks that the only way A-Plant can reopen the nursery is if Seokheon promises to leave the company alone and cough up the cash for the damages. Seokheon then asks who the father of the baby is, and she tells him that the kid isn't his. Her plan was to go back to A-Plant once everything blew over, and that's why she lied. He's like, it doesn't matter because her next kid is gonna be his, and from now on, she's only sleeping with him. And then, well, they get down to business. When she wakes up later, Seokheon's already dressed and barking at her to hit the shower. She asks when he woke up, and in response, he coldly asks if she would have bailed if he'd been asleep, which makes her wonder if he even slept at all. After she's out of the shower, Seokheon surprises her by offering to dry her hair, a first for him. When he's done, she asks where her clothes are, and he's like, oh, I tossed them. Before she can say anything, he whips out his tablet, showing her that he's about to send money to A-Plant. He gives her a choice, hit the button to send the cash and stay with him, or go running back to Seokheon and bust her but rebuilding the nursery, only to watch it go up in flames over and over again. He reminds her that he can get away with this scot-free, and if he gets bored of the whole burning thing, he can always switch to sneakier tactics. She's like, what about the baby? He's all, even though it's not his, it's still hers. So, she hits that send button, choosing to stick with him. Seokheon holds Yeonwoo's hand and suggests they go to Seoul, but she pulls away, insisting on cleaning up her apartment first. Seokheon calls Yoonseon, instructing her to throw away Yeonwoo's belongings and call a cleaner. Yeonwoo mentions needing to retrieve important items like her bank book and ultrasound photo, and Seokheon assures her that Yoonseon will bring them. As Yeonwoo tries to say more, Seokheon snaps at her to be quiet so he can focus, leaving her silent for the rest of the call, even after he puts his jacket over her. Hours later, they arrive at Jae-shik's house, where he tearfully welcomes Yeonwoo home, asking about her long trip. She apologizes, and he suggests they eat something he had the staff prepare upon hearing of her return. As they head inside, Jeonggi senses something amiss and questions Seokheon about his business trip, expressing surprise at seeing him with Yeonwoo. He mentions a successful trip and follows his grandfather and Yeonwoo inside. During the meal, Jae-shik inquires about Yeonwoo's whereabouts and lack of contact, and she vaguely responds with here and there. He asks about pictures and expresses his eagerness to know about her travels. Seokheon suddenly reveals that Yeonwoo is pregnant, shocking Jeonggi. Jae-shik asks Yeonwoo for confirmation, but she remains silent. He excitedly mentions his conception dream about Yeonwoo's baby and inquires if she met someone nice during her travels, causing her to bow her head in shame. As Jae-shik rambles about the good fortune of the dream, Seokheon announces that he is the father of the baby, causing Yeonwoo to flinch and yell at him. She had not intended to reveal the father's identity to avoid disappointing Jae-shik. Jeonggi, unable to comprehend the situation, warns Seokheon against making such jokes due to his grandfather's age. Seokheon questions his reason for joking and puts his arm around Yeonwoo, stating that she is carrying his child and beginning to show. Jeonggi starts to yell, but Jae-shik interrupts, asking Yeonwoo if Seokheon's claims are true. Seokheon confirms creating the child with Yeonwoo, prompting Jae-shik to shout at him to be quiet, causing Yeonwoo to tense up. Seokheon advises Jae-shik not to startle Yeonwoo for the baby's sake. Jae-shik asks Yeonwoo to confirm the truth, but she remains quiet and trembling. Seokheon declares his intention to marry Yeonwoo. Jae-shik stands and begins to leave, assuring a teary-eyed Yeonwoo that he isn't upset with her but needs time to process the information. He suggests continuing the conversation the next day with a clear head. Yeonwoo cries and apologizes to Jae-shik, who reassures her that it's alright. In Seokheon's room, Yeonwoo yells at him for revealing to Jae-shik that they created a baby together. Seokheon calmly informs her that he brought her back solely to marry her, which will make the baby his. She questions if he will proceed with his plans despite Jae-shik's reaction, and he counters by asking if Jae-shik's response should erase what happened between them. Yeonwoo insists they should pretend nothing ever occurred, even if something did. Seokheon approaches Yeonwoo, causing her to retreat until she sits on the bed. He reminds her that he brought her back despite her carrying another man's child and warns her to stay quiet and obey him if she wants to avoid gossip. Kneeling before her, Seokheon admits feeling defeated by the child in her stomach, glaring at it. Yeonwoo, frightened, asks if he is crazy. He confesses his intense feelings for her, driving him to accept another man's child. Seokheon believes his grandfather won't kick Yeonwoo out, and with Jae-shik eagerly anticipating great-grandchildren, she won't be able to run away. Holding her face, he tells her to accept him as her man since he is accepting her baby. He tries to kiss her, but she turns away, shouting at him to stop. Instead, he kisses the spot between her neck and shoulder. With tears in her eyes, she asks why he is doing this to her, and he urges her to accept him as the child's father. He puts his hand up her dress, touching her stomach, and mentions that the previous day wasn't enough to satisfy him, causing her to blush before they become intimate. The next morning, Seokheon wakes a sore Yeonwoo and places her breakfast beside the bed. She expresses concern about getting food on the bed, but he reminds her of the house's many rooms, suggesting she can sleep elsewhere if the bed gets dirty. He feeds her himself, and after a few bites, Yeonwoo says she doesn't want to eat anymore, feeling sleepy. He makes her eat one more bite before letting her sleep, then leaves the room. Returning the plates to the kitchen, Seokheon is about to go back upstairs when Jae-shik calls him for a chat. Jae-shik asks if Seokheon initiated the relationship with Yeonwoo, which he calmly confirms. When asked if he forced himself on her, Seokheon denies it but acknowledges her long-standing guilt. Jae-shik inquires about the duration of their relationship, and upon hearing it's been nearly 3 years, he gasps and winces, questioning if Yeonwoo has been swayed by Seokheon while feeling guilty for 2 whole years. Seokheon affirms this, and an angry Jae-shik scolds his grandson for his shameful behavior. Seokheon argues that the only way to put Yeonwoo at ease is for Jae-shik to accept their relationship, prompting Jae-shik to ask if he is using Yeonwoo to threaten him. Seokheon admits it and declares their intention to marry. He wants to schedule the wedding before Yeonwoo's pregnancy becomes more evident, but Jae-shik refuses. Jae-shik explains that a shotgun wedding would prevent him from facing Mr. Seo, and he can't have Yeonwoo prepare for a wedding in her condition or give her a subpar celebration when she is like a granddaughter to him. He insists on a proper wedding after Yeonwoo recovers from giving birth, and Seokheon bows, accepting his grandfather's wishes. Jae-shik then asks if Yeonwoo was Seokheon's request upon returning from Dubai, and when Seokheon confirms this, Jae-shik glares at him, expressing his growing shame towards his grandson. Changing the subject, Jae-shik mentions an upcoming dam construction project in Vietnam and instructs Seokheon to win the contract. Seokheon questions the necessity of his involvement, and Jae-shik explains that people are talking about a young man being chosen as his successor, but the youngster needs to deliver results to secure the promotion. He urges Seokheon to assume the vice president position before becoming a father, clarifying that he isn't offering the job out of pride but to ensure Yeonwoo and the child feel dignified. Jae-shik reminds Seokheon to treat Yeonwoo well, and Seokheon agrees. As Seokheon leaves, Jae-shik muses that anything can be good news if one believes it to be. Jae-shik has a mission for Jeonggi during breakfast: visit the fortune teller, Cheolim, in Hanamdong with Yeonwoo and Seokheon's birth info to find the perfect wedding date. With Yeonwoo's baby due around early winter, Jeonggi should aim for a date the following year, giving the new mom plenty of recovery time. Plus, Seokheon's upcoming promotion to vice president means he'll need a year to prep for the big day. Jeonggi's silence raises eyebrows, and Jae-shik wonders if she's planning to oppose a marriage he's already given the green light. He even throws in a little warning, telling her not to give Yeonwoo a hard time as a mother-in-law, especially since she didn't go through that herself. Jeonggi, a bit shaken, puts down her spoon and promises to find the perfect date for the lovebirds. As Seokheon heads upstairs, Jeonggi watches him, thinking about how she didn't give up her research career to end up where she is now. Seokheon sneaks back to the bedroom to get ready for work, planting a kiss on a snoozing Yeonwoo's head. His mind wanders to their steamy night together, where he kept her going even when she was about to collapse, finding some twisted relief in her sickly, passed-out state. On his way out, he lets Jae-shik know that Yeon was not feeling so hot, and she's pretty wiped out. Jae-shik wastes no time calling up Dr. Young and telling the maids to whip up some porridge for Yeonwoo. Meanwhile, Jeonggi's in the corner, secretly wishing death upon Yeonwoo and everyone else. After checking on Yeonwoo, Dr. Young gives Jae-shik the scoop: no fever meds needed, but her muscles are weak, so N4 is in order. Jae-shik's all about trusting Young, the family doc, and drops the bombshell that Yeon was set to become Seokheon's wife. Young's mind is blown when he realizes she's carrying Jae-shik's great-grandkid. Jae-shik gushes about Yeonwoo's sweetness, wishing she was his actual grandchild, and figures Seokheon must find her just as lovely, showing how alike they are. Young mentions Seokheon bringing Yeonwoo to the hospital a few times, even for some back treatment, which catches Jae-shik off guard. He checks Yeonwoo's medical file and finds out she had skin grafts on some burned parts of her back, needing 3 surgeries. Jae-shik's heart breaks a little. He tells Young he's trusting him with the care of Yeonwoo's future great-grandkids, and Young's all in, promising to send someone to remove her when it's time. After the doc heads out, Jae-shik vows to have Yeonwoo's back until his last breath. Fast forward 2 months, and a pregnant Yeonwoo's tending to the orchids, thinking about how surprisingly accepting Jae-shik's been and wishing she'd been honest from the start. Do-kyung texts her about the finished greenhouse, and they catch up, with Yeonwoo mentioning how comfy she is and how the baby daddy's been on a business trip to Vietnam for the past 10 days. She thinks about spilling the truth, given how well things are going. Jae-shik pops in and chats with Yeonwoo about the orchids, dropping some wisdom about too much of a good thing and telling her he's sure she'll live smarter than him and her grandpa, having learned from their mistakes. Yeon was grateful for the advice, knowing she's still got a ways to go. In the dining room, Jae-shik fills Yeonwoo in on some stocks he put in her name last year, growing her inheritance from Mr. Seo. He even added more and wants her to sign some papers with his lawyer's help. Yeonwoo says she's all good, but Jae-shik insists on making sure she's financially stable, especially without blood relatives to count on. She thanks him for looking out for her. Meanwhile, Jeonggi's silently stewing over not being able to snag any miry construction stocks. When Jae-shik asks why she's not eating, she quietly mumbles that she is. Jae-shik encourages Yeonwoo to chew her food well during the meal, then turns to Jeonggi, reminding her not to waste the food. In his mind, he muses about how karma works, believing Jeonggi should be treated the same way she treated others. His thoughts drift to a time years ago when he pleaded with Jeonggi to let his son, Myung-hun, go, as Myung-hun's wife, Seokheon's mother, was pregnant with their second child. Jae-shik wanted Myung-hun to focus on his family, even offering Jeonggi money, but she glared at him, questioning who was pregnant, ultimately choosing his son over the offered money. Not long after that confrontation, Jae-shik's daughter-in-law collapsed, clutching a photo Jeonggi had sent her, exposing Myung-hun's infidelity. Jae-shik confronted Jeonggi again, demanding an explanation, and she coolly replied that she had simply informed Myung-hun's wife of her pregnancy with his child. The shock caused by Jeonggi's actions led to Seokheon's mother having a miscarriage. Jeonggi, brazenly calling Jae-shik father, told him that Myung-hun's child was growing inside her and that he should forget about the child Myung-hun's wife had lost. She declared herself more than worthy of being Myung-hun's wife. The trauma intensified Seokheon's mother's depression, eventually leading to her death, after which Jeonggi swiftly moved into the house, as if to prove a point. After the meal, Yeonwoo sits with Jae-shik in the living room, revealing she's having a boy. When a maid brings apples for Jae-shik, Yeonwoo offers to peel them, smiling as she does. Jae-shik asks about her smile, and she reminisces about peeling apples for her busy grandpa on the farm. Jae-shik praises her apple peeling skills and mentions his intention to visit Mr. Seo's grave soon. Yeonwoo shares that she visited the grave last winter but offers to join Jae-shik if he goes. Jae-shik expresses his need to inform Mr. Seo about Yeonwoo's upcoming marriage to Seokheon, suggesting that Mr. Seo might be willing to give his precious granddaughter to his family due to a certain incident. Curious, Yeonwoo asks about the incident, and Jae-shik reveals how Seokheon ensured the relocation of an industrial complex meant to be built in her hometown, which would have affected her father's grave, to the next town. This revelation surprises Yeonwoo. Jae-shik reflects on how Seokheon, having lost his mother and grandmother, understood the solace a simple grave could provide to those left behind. He also shares that upon entering Myri Construction, Seokheon insisted on taking over the business department. Jae-shik, assuming Seokheon had his reasons, granted him the director role. Seokheon then made sure all news companies were informed of his position, which Jae-shik initially attributed to ambition. However, it turned out Seokheon needed the title to influence the decisions of powerful men in Korea. Yeonwoo admits her lack of knowledge about these events, and Jae-shik emphasizes that good deeds should be shared. He further reveals that Seokheon flew to Vietnam after approving their wedding, telling Jae-shik that the trip would greatly benefit his wife. Yeonwoo expresses her intention to thank Seokheon upon his return. Later, while admiring the orchids, Yeonwoo recalls her grandpa's advice about maintaining balance in all things. She wonders if she has given enough of her heart to Seokheon. Just then, her baby kicks, and as she holds her stomach, she thinks about revealing the truth for her little hope's sake. In that moment, she decides it's time to be honest. In the next scene, we see Jeonggi barging into an apartment bedroom where a couple is being intimate, causing the embarrassed woman to cover herself while the angry man demands Jeonggi leave. Unfazed, Jeonggi identifies herself as the man's wife and tells the woman to return in 2 hours. The woman flees, and Jeonggi orders her husband, Myung-hun, to dress, expressing her distaste for seeing an old man's bare body. Irritated, Myung-hun asks Jeonggi's purpose for being there, urging her to speak her mind and leave. She insists he dress first and waits in the kitchen. Moments later, Myung-hun enters in a robe, grabs a water bottle, and tells Jeonggi not to scold him like his mother, demanding she say her piece and leave. Jeonggi reveals Seokheon's impending promotion to vice president, shocking Myung-hun. She explains that Seokheon's recent Vietnam business trip is a means to secure results and justify his promotion. Myung-hun questions Seokheon's qualifications, given his young age. Jeonggi suggests it's due to Seokheon's pregnant fiancée, reminding Myung-hun of Jae-shik's concern for his bloodline and his past treatment of Myung-hun. Myung-hun yells at Jeonggi to be quiet, realizing that Seokheon's promotion would end his chances of regaining his position. Jeonggi adds that he'll be dead once the baby is born. Furious, Myung-hun squeezes the water bottle, calling Yeonwoo a lousy tramp who got pregnant, causing Jeonggi to smile. At the airport, Seokheon's colleague, Mr. Cheon, rushes to the duty-free shops to buy a gift for his pregnant wife. Kaeong, Yeonwoo's former co-worker, explains the situation to Seokheon, who asks about typical gifts for pregnant women. Kyeong, aware of Yeonwoo's pregnancy, expresses his happiness for the couple. Kyeong reveals that Yeonwoo faced difficulties with her colleagues, surprising Seokheon. He explains that other employees harshly gossiped about Yeonwoo behind her back, even creating a group chat to discuss her relationship with Seokheon. Although not part of the chat, Kyeong later learned the full story and empathized with Yeonwoo's struggles. Determined, Seokheon suggests they visit the duty-free shops, even if it means delaying their flight. He continues shopping, accumulating many bags. Upon finding a blue onesie, Kyeong compliments it and asks if the baby is a boy. Meanwhile, at Jae-shik's house, Yeonwoo finds Jae-shik dressed in a suit, preparing to receive a report at the office for Seokheon's return. She inquires about his attire, knowing the news crew will be present. Jae-shik confirms this and asks for her opinion on his outfit, which she compliments. He shares his plan to have Seokheon handle future interviews, allowing little hope to see videos of his amazing dad, making Yeonwoo smile. Jae-shik learns that Yeonwoo is getting a 3D ultrasound to check on the baby's detailed features. He marvels at the advancements since Seokheon's birth. At that moment, little hope kicks, prompting Yeonwoo to think about telling the truth for the family's sake. As Jae-shik departs, he requests that Yeonwoo send him the 3D ultrasound, and she beams, assuring him she will. In the hospital, Yeonwoo's doctor praises her handsome son during the ultrasound, noting that he's yawning in the womb. She informs Yeonwoo about accessing the ultrasound video through an app. Looking at the 3D image, Yeonwoo thinks the baby is a carbon copy of his father. After leaving the hospital, she instructs her driver to take her to the department store. At the store, Lee Eun-jong introduces herself as Yeonwoo's personal shopper. Yeonwoo, initially referring to Seokheon as Director Lee Seokheon before correcting herself and calling him her husband, explains that she's there to buy him a gift. Despite never having picked out a gift for Seokheon before, she knows he frequents the store's VIP lounge. When asked about the occasion, Yeonwoo expresses her desire for a gift Seokheon can wear often. Eun-jong suggests a tie, prompting Yeonwoo to imagine knotting Seokheon's tie in the morning. She asks for recommendations, and after selecting her favorite, she requests that Eun-jong package the ultrasound picture inside the box. On her way home, Yeonwoo looks at the gift, resolving to tell Seokheon the truth when she presents it to him. At home, a smiling Jeonggi greets Yeonwoo, inquiring about her doctor's appointment and the baby's health. Yeonwoo shows her the ultrasound video and mentions buying Jeonggi a cardigan the personal shopper recommended. As Yeonwoo hands over the gift, Jeonggi mutters about Yeonwoo enjoying her new family status. When asked to repeat herself, Jeonggi denies saying anything. Jeonggi then asks Yeonwoo to attend an event in her place, claiming she has plans with other wives at an art gallery. She emphasizes that as a family member, Yeonwoo should start fulfilling her role. Jeonggi suggests it's an opportunity for Yeonwoo to bond with Seokheon's father, and Yeonwoo agrees, causing Jeonggi to smile evilly. Later, a nervous Yeonwoo arrives at Myung-hun's apartment, recalling Jeonggi's instructions. Jeonggi told her that Seokheon's father is ill and bedridden, and Yeonwoo's task is to ensure he takes his medicine and prepare his dinner. She also mentioned that Myung-hun is the least favorite family member, making Yeonwoo the only one she trusts to send. Entering the apartment using the passcode, Yeonwoo finds Myung-hun intimately engaged with a woman in the living room, shocking her. She quickly turns away to avoid being noticed, but her bag hits the wall, alerting them to her presence. The woman flees, and Myung-hun asks if Yeonwoo is Seokheon's fiancé. When she doesn't respond, he yells at her to speak, and she bows, greeting him. He mentions hearing about her visit to bring him food because of his illness. Yeonwoo confirms she brought porridge, and he orders her to prepare it. In the kitchen, Yeonwoo freezes, shocked by the filthy state of the room. Myung-hun yells at her to get the food ready. She cleans the kitchen first, then prepares and serves the food. When Myung-hun asks if there's more, she brings an additional serving, and he calls his mistress to join them. Yeonwoo, recalling Jeonggi's claim that Myung-hun was sick in bed, wonders what's really going on. Yeonwoo recognizes Myung-hun's companion as a famous married actress. As they eat, the woman praises the food from Myung-hun's house, and he attributes it to the long-serving housekeepers, unlike her own. Yeonwoo speculates about the nature of their relationship based on their familiarity with each other's homes, longing to leave. Myung-hun abruptly orders Yeonwoo to continue cleaning the foul-smelling kitchen, and she complies, preferring it to standing idle. The woman inquires about Yeonwoo's identity, wondering if Myung-hun has impregnated someone else. Upon learning who Yeonwoo is, she remarks that she's plainer than expected. Myung-hun compares Seokheon to himself, suggesting that he's fulfilling his duty by having one child before freely indulging in other pursuits. He adds that Seokheon, cunning like his grandfather, chose a submissive woman like Yeonwoo to bear his child. Yeonwoo, overhearing the conversation, decides to leave once she finishes cleaning, realizing that staying will only lead to trouble. After the meal, as Yeonwoo packs the dishes, Myung-hun unexpectedly touches her stomach, startling her. He questions her reaction, implying that a father-in-law should be able to touch his pregnant daughter-in-law's stomach, prompting his mistress to make a vulgar comment about Yeonwoo's breasts. Myung-hun asks about Yeonwoo's pregnancy progress, and she responds, thinking that she and the baby are mere objects to him. He pokes her stomach, mentioning his father's reliance on his in-laws to start the business, which kept him faithful to Myung-hun's mother. He then questions whether Yeonwoo believes Seokheon will remain monogamous throughout his life. Yeonwoo recognizes Myung-hun's lack of respect for others and decides not to engage with him. He continues, commenting on her poor background and questioning her manners for not responding to an elder's question. The woman intervenes, reminding Myung-hun of Yeonwoo's pregnancy. Myung-hun tells her to be quiet and fetch him a glass of whiskey. When she does, he orders Yeonwoo to drink it, disregarding her refusal due to her condition. He accuses her of rejecting a drink from her father-in-law during their first formal meeting. The woman argues that he's being too harsh, pointing out that Yeonwoo's unborn child will be the future successor of Myri Construction. Enraged, Myung-hun yells that no one will become the successor without his permission and forces the whiskey into Yeonwoo's mouth. Yeonwoo quickly moves away, causing the glass to shatter on the floor, and runs out of the apartment. Myung-hun questions how someone so weak can become the lady of Myri Construction. He calls Jeonggi, informing her that he shook Yeonwoo up, causing her to flee. He instructs Jeonggi to handle the rest, offering to have Yeonwoo sent back to him if she complies. After the call, his mistress asks if he and his wife are trying to reconcile. He dismissively responds, implying that he already has a delectable fish to steal from someone else. At Myri Construction's interview room, Jae-sik and Seokheon meet with PR Team 2's head, Manager Choi Seokheon, Young Mi-hyun, and Shin Jung-mi. Seokheon recalls Kyoung's revelation about Mi-hyun's influence on the team and her spreading rumors about his relationship with Yeonwoo. Kyoung also mentioned that Seokheon likely gave Yeonwoo a hard time when she was part of the team. During the interview, Jae-sik discusses the Vietnam project Seokheon secured, beaming with pride as Seokheon speaks. Afterward, Jae-sik informs Seokheon of his departure, mentioning a present waiting for him at home. Seokheon loudly instructs Yoonseon to have the items he purchased wrapped in blue at the department store, as his pregnant wife is expecting a boy, capturing the attention of Mi-hyun and Jung-mi. Seokheon then invites Seokheon to dinner, shocking him. He clarifies that he should first consult his wife, who is acquainted with Seokheon, and that she would be delighted to have dinner with him. Seokheon eagerly agrees to be available anytime, and Seokheon promises to be in touch soon, glancing towards Mi-hyun, who quickly looks away, curious about Seokheon's wife's identity. After Seokheon's departure, Seokheon remarks to Mi-hyun that she was correct about Seokheon having rings made. He inquires about her acquaintance with Seokheon and any additional information she might have. Mi-hyun, feigning ignorance, continues to wonder about Seokheon's wife's identity, dismissing the thought of Yeonwoo. Jungmi mentions Kyung's numerous duty-free shopping pictures from his business trip, suggesting that the dozens of shopping bags likely belong to Seokheon, given Kyung's modest office worker salary. Seokheon finds it surprising that a successful man like Seokheon shops at duty-free stores, and Jungmi shares that the daughter of a wealthy group posted pictures of herself shopping at a duty-free shop, astonishing Seokheon. Jungmi comments on Seokheon's apparent devotion to his wife, challenging her preconception that wealthy people only marry for convenience. Mihyun, recalling her encounter with Yeonwoo and Seokheon, refuses to believe they are together, deeming Yeonwoo far beyond Seokheon's league. Meanwhile, Seokheon arrives home, greets his grandfather, and heads upstairs. His grandfather teasingly remarks on his eagerness, as if he has a hidden treasure waiting. Seokheon, having spent 2 weeks in Vietnam, longs for Yeonwoo. Finding the room empty but hearing the shower running, he notices Yeonwoo's phone buzzing on the bed. He sees texts from Do-kyung, with Yeonwoo congratulating him on his business success, expressing pride, and promising a gift. Opening the box containing the tie Yeonwoo purchased, Seokheon mistakenly assumes it's for Do-kyung and then discovers the ultrasound pictures. Yeonwoo emerges from the bathroom, rushes to Seokheon, and asks if he saw the ultrasound. He crumples the picture, questioning if he wasn't meant to see it. Confused, she asks why he's damaging the photo. He accuses her of sending a gift and the picture to her baby's father, disregarding his own success in the Vietnam project. He tosses the picture on the floor, and as Yeonwoo retrieves and attempts to smooth it, she asks what's wrong with him. She clarifies that the tie-in photo are for him, not Do-kyung, but he doesn't believe her. In a fit of rage, he smashes her phone and pushes her onto the bed, ignoring her pleas to stop. He tells her that if she's giving her heart to someone else, she should at least give him her body. She insists she has never given her heart to anyone else, but he remains skeptical. He opens her robe, removes his tie, and begins kissing her while accusing her of lying about the gift being his and declares that once the baby is born, she shouldn't consider breastfeeding because he plans to have his own child with her in the next 9 months. After their intimate encounter, Seokheon immediately retreats to the bathroom, deviating from his usual gentle post-intimacy care for Yeonwoo. She reflects on her past tendency to remain silent and avoid clarifying misunderstandings, but now, for the baby's sake, she resolves to clear things up. When Seokheon returns, she attempts to explain that she bought the tie for him, only fueling his anger. She suggests he verify with the department store's personal shopper, but he dismisses the idea, believing the tactful women there would side with Yeonwoo. She expresses her desire to show him the baby's face through the photo, but he averts his gaze, stating that he's only accepting the baby because she's carrying it. He accuses her of trying to pin another man's child on him now that she feels cornered. Pinning her against the wall, Seokheon reminds her that he always gets what he wants and is forcing her to marry him. He declares that regardless of her feelings, she will be his wife for the rest of her life, until her last breath. Tears stream down her face as she reflects on her intention to do the right thing and tell him the truth. He advises her to be smart and not resist, promising to be the best for her baby as well. Outside their room, Jeonggi, having overheard everything, smiles and remarks that things have become interesting. The next morning, Yeonwoo is surprised to see Seokheon wearing the tie she bought. As she helps straighten it, she compliments his personal shopper's eye for what suits him, and he acknowledges that she made a great choice. She walks him to the car, where he unexpectedly touches her stomach, and they both feel the baby kick. She tells him the baby is wishing him a good day at work. He nods and directs her to the second-floor den, mentioning that he bought her some items during his business trip. He kisses her while Jeonggi observes, then whispers to Yeonwoo that he's still upset with her. Yeonwoo enters the den, astonished by the abundance of gifts from Seokheon. After examining them, she caresses her stomach, assuring Hope that his father isn't a bad person, just deeply upset the day before. She promises to restore everything and clear up the misunderstandings so they can live surrounded by love. Downstairs, Jeonggi interrogates the maids about Yeonwoo's whereabouts, and they reluctantly reveal her location when Jeonggi yells at them. Jeonggi ascends the stairs, instructing the maids not to approach the second floor until she returns. Jeonggi approaches Yeonwoo, suggesting they talk. Seated, Jeonggi mentions overhearing Yeonwoo and Seokheon's conversation the previous day, noting their apparent discord. Yeonwoo wonders if Jeonggi heard Seokheon denying the baby's paternity. Jeonggi points out that having met Seokheon's father, Yeonwoo must understand that wealthy men face numerous temptations and often stray. Yeonwoo, addressing Jeonggi as mother, expresses confusion about her intentions. Jeonggi asserts that womanizing runs in the family, speculating that even Jae-sik might have been unfaithful, as it's common among businessmen of his generation. Yeonwoo challenges this claim, and Jeonggi questions her certainty. She suggests that losing the baby at 6 months wouldn't harm Yeonwoo's body, asking if she wouldn't prefer living freely instead of having Seokheon's child and suffering like herself and Seokheon's mother. Yeonwoo realizes that Jeonggi's reference to Seokheon's baby indicates she didn't hear everything from the previous day. Jeonggi warns that even if Yeonwoo has the baby, he will endure a difficult life like Seokheon or her daughter Sujin, emphasizing from experience that being a wife in the family is arduous, and the children are destined for anguish and pain. Yeonwoo interrupts, attributing Seokheon and Sujin's suffering to the mistakes of the adults, their father Myung-hun, Jeonggi, and Seokheon's mother. Touching her stomach, Yeonwoo vows never to let her child suffer, angering Jeonggi. Jeonggi argues that men's obsessions wane once they possess something, questioning if Yeonwoo believes Seokheon will remain devoted after she has the baby and fully becomes his wife. She claims she's only asking because Yeonwoo doesn't know Seokheon's true nature. Yeonwoo defends Seokheon, insisting his behavior stemmed from a minor argument and that he isn't fickle. Jeonggi asks if Yeonwoo still wants to enter the fiery pit of hell, knowing the lives Seokheon, Sujin, and their father lead. She accuses them of being alike, using their children to pursue the Lee family's wealth. Yeonwoo denies this, and they stare at each other in silence before Jeonggi stands, declaring that time will reveal the truth. After Jeonggi leaves, Yeonwoo promises herself never to let Hope be unhappy. Jeonggi, furious about the conversation's outcome, reflects on her intention to civilly persuade Yeonwoo to leave. Now, she believes her only option is to find a way to terminate Yeonwoo's pregnancy before it's too late. Before Yeonwoo can clear things up with Seokheon, he embarks on another extended business trip to Vietnam, and another month passes without the truth being revealed. However, the baby continues to develop healthily as Yeonwoo enters her 7th month of pregnancy. Jae-sik inquires if Seokheon is returning from Vietnam that day, and when Yeonwoo confirms, he proposes they meet later for dinner at the hotel in Jangcheon-dong. He mentions a special item he requested from Vietnam, which Seokheon will deliver to one of the hotel's shops. Yeonwoo agrees to go. After she leaves to prepare, Jeonggi asks Jae-sik about his request from Vietnam. He explains that with the wedding set to take place after Yeonwoo gives birth, it's time to start arranging the appropriate jewelry. Seokheon is bringing back gems from Vietnam's Lu Pien district. Jae-sik adds that he has long frequented a jewelry shop in the hotel's shopping center. Jeonggi remarks that Yeonwoo will love it while privately thinking that if things continue as they are, Jae-sik will essentially place Yeonwoo above her, and she can't stand idly by and allow this nonsense to persist. Later, at the Jangcheon-dong Hotel, Yeonwoo happily calls out to Seokheon in the lobby, and he looks at her, surprised by her presence. As they converse, people around them recognize Seokheon and speculate whether the pregnant woman with him is his wife. Seokheon pulls Yeonwoo close, causing her to blush as people watch. She asks him how she looks in her new maternity dress, and he gazes at her, saying she looks stunning, making her heart race. As they walk away, she inquires about what grandfather asked him to bring back from Vietnam. He informs her that he already delivered it to the jewelry store and that it's something she must see for herself. When they arrive at the store, a jeweler greets them and presents the beautifully cut red gemstone Seokheon brought from Vietnam, amazing Yeonwoo. As she admires it, The jeweler discusses the stone's quality and mentions that Jae-shik must have wanted to give her a variety of gifts featuring the gemstone, indicating how much he cherishes her. The jeweler then expresses his desire to show Yeonwoo what he considers Myri Construction's most meaningful family jewel. He presents a ring that belonged to Jae-shik's wife and was later passed down to Seokheon's mother. The jeweler explains that Jae-shik wanted to reset the ring to make it look brand new before giving it to Yeonwoo, and suggests they determine her ring size. Yeonwoo shows him the ring Seokheon used to propose, mentioning that at the time, they had to keep their relationship secret, so her husband proposed with a pre-made ring from a different shop. Seokheon notes her use of the term husband. She continues, giving the jeweler the ring and explaining that she hasn't been able to wear it lately due to her swollen fingers from pregnancy, but the size is perfect. She expresses her desire to wear Seokheon's mother's ring without resetting it, believing it would be more meaningful to wear it as is since it was worn by someone precious to her husband. She looks at Seokheon, seeking his opinion and calling him honey. Surprised, Seokheon again notes her use of the term honey, causing his heart to beat faster. He tells her to do as she pleases, wondering about her behavior. The jeweler returns Yeonwoo's ring after taking the size, and as she puts it back on, Seokheon stares at her. As they leave the store, Seokheon thinks to himself that he now understands how doting husbands must feel. Later, as they wait for their food in the restaurant, Seokheon inquires if there's anything else Yeonwoo desires besides the rubies he brought from Vietnam. When she asks if he means more jewels, he mentions that she seemed to enjoy the ones he got, but she says she probably won't wear the rubies frequently. He asks if she'll regret not having a grand wedding, but she assures him she won't. She then asks why he didn't buy any gifts for her on his way back from Vietnam, surprising him. She mentions that she's been using the ones he got last time, and he explains that he was so focused on bringing the jewels back that he didn't have time. When he asks if she's sad about not receiving anything, she admits that she is, and he inquires if there's something she needs. She tells him that she needs his attention, thinking to herself that she promised to tell him the truth upon his return and is determined to do so that night. As the waiter brings their food, she expresses her appreciation for everything he got her. She whispers to him that she's wearing the lingerie he bought, stunning him, and then discusses its comfort, forgiving him for not getting her anything since he showed her a beautiful gem. Seokheon watches her eat and asks if she's not full yet. She points out that the food just arrived, and he suggests they order room service instead. She agrees and mentions having something to tell him, proposing they talk in the room. He takes her hand and leads her to the room. In the room, he tries to kiss her, but she stops him, asking him to brush his teeth first since he just ate. As he hurries to the bathroom, she takes out a notebook from her purse, believing she has irrefutable evidence that Seokheon can't deny and wondering if he'll be happy to learn he's the baby's real father. She recalls Jae-shik mentioning earlier that day that something happened between her and Seokheon after his last business trip. Jae-shik told her he knew it was Seokheon's fault and that Seokheon is someone who doesn't show love because he never experienced it before. However, Seokheon insisted on going to Vietnam again when he learned the gift was for Yeonwoo. Jae-shik encouraged her to do her best to support their relationship, promising to help them behind the scenes if needed. When Seokheon returns from the bathroom, he embraces Yeonwoo and starts kissing her. She breaks the kiss, saying she hasn't brushed her teeth, but he tells her it's fine and continues kissing her. As Yeonwoo thinks to herself that she has something more important than kissing to discuss with him, she responds to his affection. He lifts her up and carries her to the bed, with her asking if she's not too heavy. He places her on the bed, and as she inquires if she's gained weight, he reassures her that she's as beautiful as always. He then removes her clothes as they continue to be intimate. Later, the pair lie in bed together as Yeonwoo runs her hand through his hair. She comments on its thickness, expressing relief that Hope's father won't go bald. Seokheon pulls her closer, and the baby kicks, which he feels against his stomach. He asks if coming out was too much for her. She questions whether seeing her stomach large with what he believes is another man's baby bothers him. He admits that he initially despised the baby but sincerely worries about it because of his love for her. As he touches her stomach again, the baby kicks, and he smiles. He expresses his hope for the baby to be born healthy so he can see her smile and promises to love the child because it's hers, even though he's not fully confident yet. She asks him to bring her notebook, and when he does, she shows him the baby's first ultrasound photo, revealing the date of her first ultrasound and when the baby was conceived. After calculating the timeline for him, she concludes by telling him that the baby was conceived before she ran away, shocking him. Seokheon stands up from the bed, and Yeonwoo immediately starts apologizing for lying. She explains that she never lived with Do-kyung and was never with him. He asks if she pretended Hope was Do-kyung's baby because she was scared of him or didn't want to return to him. She admits that she thought it was the best option for her at the time and didn't know he was trying to gain acceptance for their relationship. She acknowledges deceiving him for her own conscience and expresses deep remorse. Holding his hand, she reveals that she nicknamed the baby Hope because after her first appointment at 17 weeks, she promised herself to create a good life for her and the baby gave her the strength to continue. She offers to beg for his forgiveness if he desires, but he tells her not to. He reflects that he must have been the biggest jerk for her to choose to run away while pregnant with his child. He confesses that he spent his whole life cursing his father for his behavior but has now become worse than him. When she asks if he doesn't resent her for lying for 4 months, he admits that he's angry but not at her. With tears in his eyes, he says that if he had just told her to wait while he sought his grandfather's blessing, she wouldn't have tricked him for 3 months. He also acknowledges that he should have worked hard to gain his grandfather's acceptance the moment he had her instead of dragging out their relationship for 2 years. Kneeling before her, he takes full responsibility for everything and apologizes sincerely. Yeonwoo gets teary-eyed as she looks at Seokheon on his knees. She holds him, telling him that he's not the only one at fault, and thinks to herself that she will teach him how to love from now on, and they will discover the meaning of love together. That night, Yeonwoo stands on the balcony, reminiscing about a previous visit to the same room with Seokheon. Years ago, when she came to meet him, she was surprised to find the room filled with flowers. He told her it was their first anniversary. As he handed her a glass of wine, she mentioned that his stepmother, Jeongi, had said something to her. When he inquired about it, she revealed that Jeongi suggested Seokheon needed to find a suitable wife to solidify his position in the family, given his father's dismissal from his management role. Seokheon told her not to listen to Jeongi, questioning who he could marry when he had her. Yeonwoo pointed out that even his grandfather had asked Jeongi to find a good marriage candidate. Seokheon reassured her, telling her not to worry about his family's opinions and promising to inform them about their relationship once he was settled at work. She suggested they should break up, shocking him, and argued that it was the right thing to do for everyone's sake, including their own. He pulled her closer, questioning her reasoning, and she expressed her desire for a normal relationship like everyone else. He asked her to wait a year until the issue with his father was resolved, by which time he would have achieved the results needed to gain his grandfather's favor, enabling them to go on regular dates. She pulled away, insisting she no longer wanted to be his secret woman, but he maintained that he had never treated her as such. She remained adamant about ending their relationship. He embraced her as she hit him repeatedly with the flower he had given her, claiming that what they had wasn't love but an immoral desire born out of curiosity. He asserted his unwavering feelings for her and urged her to trust him if she couldn't trust herself. Back in the present, Yeonwoo watches Seokheon sleep, thinking that with hope as a bridge between them, it might be okay to give love a chance this time. She hugs him as she falls asleep beside him. Days later, as Yeonwoo reflects on how her relationship with Seokheon has changed since revealing the truth, Jae-shik approaches her and inquires if something is going on with Seokheon, glancing outside. Yeonwoo informs him that Seokheon plans to build a shelf for the orchid garden himself, similar to the one her grandfather had made before. Jae-shik clarifies that he didn't ask to know what Seokheon was doing but rather to point out the unusual piece on Seokheon's face lately. Yeonwoo shares that Seokheon told her he's becoming excited as the baby's due date approaches, and Jae-shik remarks on the joy a man feels when becoming a father. She thinks to herself that if she had known telling Seokheon the baby was his would put him at ease, she would have revealed the truth earlier. Jae-shik expresses his previous worry that Seokheon might turn out like his father but trusts that Yeonwoo, having grown up receiving love from her grandfather, will be able to guide Seokheon to become a good head of the family despite his faults. She asks if Jae-shik knows how much Seokheon resembles him as a family man, and Jae-shik laughs, attributing it to her influence. They go to the garden to meet Seokheon, who questions their presence upon seeing them. Jae-shik jokingly expresses concern about a boy who has never touched a hammer being able to build something, but Seokheon confidently asserts that there's nothing he's bad at. He then holds Yeonwoo, advising her to stay inside with the air conditioning, and when she says she wanted to check on his progress, he emphasizes the risk of overheating during pregnancy. Jae-shik playfully points out that seniors shouldn't get overheated either, but Seokheon only cares for his wife. Seokheon assures him that he's in good shape and will likely be around long enough to see Hope get married. Jae-shik, taking a closer look at Seokheon's creation, suggests that it could use a hook at the end, perfect for hanging a watering can. Seokheon, caught off guard, admits that he hadn't thought to buy any hooks. Curious about her opinion, Jae-shik turns to Yeonwoo, who agrees that hooks would be a great addition. Without hesitation, Seokheon announces his plan to head to the hardware store. Yeonwoo, surprised by his sudden decision, assures him that there's no need to rush off immediately. Seokheon, with a playful tone, reminds her of her own advice about the key to success being a husband who listens to his wife. Jae-shik, amused by the exchange, chimes in, mentioning his own desire for a new hoe and decides to accompany Seokheon to the store. As the men prepare to leave, Jeonggi watches from inside the house, silently questioning what makes Yeonwoo so special in their eyes. Rewind to a few days earlier when the jeweler paid a visit, presenting Yeonwoo with an array of imitation stone rings to choose from for her wedding. The jeweler assured her that the designs for her wedding jewelry would be one of a kind, never to be recreated, ensuring that no low-cost or imitation versions would flood the market. As Yeonwoo carefully selected her favorite, Jeonggi watched from a corner, seething with anger, realizing that Yeonwoo's current life was everything she had ever dreamed of for herself. The jeweler then revealed Seokheon's mother's ring, now cleaned and polished. Jae-shik, reminiscing about the time he proposed, admitted that his financial situation had limited him to a small diamond. Seokheon, quick to interject, shared how he had offered to buy Yeonwoo a bigger diamond, but she had preferred the sentimental value of the original ring. Jae-shik, chuckling, remarked that the wife of Myri Construction should allow herself a bit more indulgence. Seokheon, without missing a beat, assured his grandfather that he could always set aside a substantial inheritance for Yeonwoo, eliminating any need for her to be greedy. The jeweler, noticing the perfect fit of the ring on Yeonwoo's finger, declared that it had found its new owner. Jeonggi, glaring from the sidelines, couldn't help but feel resentful that the ring wasn't hers. Due to Yeonwoo's swollen fingers from pregnancy, they decided to keep the ring safely stored for the time being. Back in the present, Yeonwoo, having returned inside the house, informs Jeonggi of her plan to rest upstairs for a bit, promising to come down in time to help with dinner preparations. Jeonggi, glaring at Yeonwoo as she ascends the stairs, suddenly calls out her name and follows her up. Confronting Yeonwoo, Jeonggi accuses her of putting on an innocent act in front of everyone while secretly manipulating Jae-shik and trying to alienate her. Yeonwoo, taken aback, asks for clarification. Jeonggi, her voice rising, accuses Yeonwoo of getting pregnant despite her warnings and firmly establishing herself in the house. Yeonwoo, seeking support, calls out to her mother, but Jeonggi covers her ears, demanding that Yeonwoo stop referring to her as such. She accuses Yeonwoo of deceiving her by pretending to be her daughter-in-law. Yeonwoo, frustrated, addresses Jeonggi by name and urges her to stop entertaining delusions, suggesting that she needs professional help. This only fuels Jeonggi's anger further. Jeonggi insists that Yeonwoo had been hiding and deceiving her all along, recalling how she had told her to end things with Seokheon, but instead, Yeonwoo had gotten pregnant and disappeared until it was too late. Yeonwoo denies this version of events, but Jeonggi persists, accusing her of leaving after getting pregnant just to spite her for telling her to leave and deliberately waiting until there was nothing Jae-shik could do but accept the baby. Yeonwoo's mind flashes back to the day Jeonggi offered her money to leave Seokheon. She calmly tells Jeonggi that her victim mentality is only causing her more torment and preventing her from seeing the truth. As Yeonwoo starts to walk away, Jeonggi forcefully grabs her, causing her to lose her balance. In a chilling moment, Jeonggi thinks to herself that she needs Yeonwoo to fall on her stomach, and with that thought, she pushes her down the stairs. Munsan, the maid, alerted by Yeonwoo's piercing screams, rushes out to investigate the commotion. To her horror, she finds Yeonwoo collapsed on the floor, clutching her stomach in agony. Without hesitation, Munsan hurries to her side, just as Jeonggi descends the stairs, feigning ignorance about the unfolding situation. Yeonwoo, her voice laced with pain, cries out about her stomach. As Munsan attempts to assist her, Jeonggi intervenes, insisting that they should refrain from moving Yeonwoo until the emergency medical team arrives. She then instructs Munsan to call for an ambulance. Jongun, the other maid, emerges from her room and instinctively moves towards Yeonwoo, but Jeonggi once again intercepts her. She cautions that attempting to lift Yeonwoo incorrectly might jeopardize the baby's well-being, all the while secretly hoping that Yeonwoo loses the child. When the paramedics arrive, Jeonggi informs them that her daughter-in-law is 7 months pregnant and implores them to provide the utmost care to prevent any harm to the unborn baby. The paramedics explain that a guardian must accompany Yeonwoo, and Jeonggi assigns Munsan to go with her while she awaits Seokheon and Jae-shik's return. As the ambulance departs, Jeonggi ponders whether Yeonwoo will reveal to Seokheon and Jae-shik that she was the one who pushed her. However, she quickly dismisses the notion, believing that Yeonwoo's gentle nature would prevent her from speaking out. Jeonggi also convinces herself that she is a victim of depression and that Yeonwoo's silence is the best way to maintain family harmony. She silently vows not to let Yeonwoo off easily if she dares to break her silence. Inside the ambulance, Munsan explains to the paramedics the details of Yeonwoo's fall and the pain she had been experiencing. Yeonwoo, determined to no longer tolerate Jeonggi's behavior, instructs Munsan to call Seokheon and ask him to meet them at the hospital. She resolves to reveal the truth to everyone. As Seokheon answers the call, Munsan relays the events that transpired, while Yeonwoo silently prays for Hope's safety. Moments earlier, at the hardware store, Seokheon questioned Jae-shik about his sudden need for a hoe, considering he rarely engages in gardening beyond tending to his orchids. Jae-shik, with a twinkle in his eye, shared his plan to take a break once he promotes Seokheon to vice president and spend time playing with Hope in the dirt, planting sweet potatoes. Seokheon, amused, predicted that his grandfather wouldn't last a week and would likely be even busier keeping an eye on his every move as the new VP. Curiosity getting the better of him, Seokheon inquired about how long Jae-shik had known about his relationship with Yeonwoo. He expressed his regret that if Jae-shik had accepted their relationship sooner, it would have made things easier for Yeonwoo. Jae-shik, in a moment of candor, admitted that he had discovered their relationship early on and had come to terms with it. However, when the reports about their relationship ceased, he assumed that if it was meant to be, they would inform him, and if not, they would go their separate ways. He also confessed that he had initially considered it a waste for someone like Yeonwoo to be with Seokheon. Seokheon, reading between the lines, suggested that Jae-shik thought Yeonwoo would make a good granddaughter but not a good granddaughter-in-law. Jae-shik, caught off guard, acknowledged that he probably did think that way. Seokheon then questioned whether Jae-shik planned to continue observing from afar, to which Jae-shik responded by sharing a lesson he had learned from Yeonwoo's grandfather. He realized that excessive affection could ruin a person and that if he had intervened the moment he discovered their relationship, they would have been pushed into a marriage of convenience, leaving Yeonwoo feeling forced into the union. Seokheon, growing more serious, expressed his discomfort with the way Jeonggi looks at Yeonwoo with disdain. He voiced his frustration with Jeonggi living with them like a parasite while her husband doesn't even reside in the house. He delivered an ultimatum to his grandfather, demanding that he send Jeonggi away, or else he would move out with Yeonwoo. At that precise moment, Seokheon's phone rang, and upon answering, Munsan informed him of Yeonwoo's predicament. Without a second thought, Seokheon bolted out of the hardware store, leaving a baffled Jae-shik to follow in his wake. In the present, Seokheon drives like a man possessed, navigating the roads with reckless determination to reach the hospital. Jae-shik, seated in the back, inquires about the situation, and Seokheon manages to relay the news, leaving Jae-shik shocked and concerned. As they arrive at the hospital, a doctor guides them to Yeonwoo's location, explaining that she is currently undergoing an ultrasound, and the curtain has been closed momentarily for privacy. Seokheon, filled with a sense of urgency, positions himself in front of the curtain and announces his intention to enter, unwilling to wait a second longer to be by his wife's side. Seokheon rushes into the room, his voice filled with concern as he asks Yeonwoo about her well-being and whether she is in any pain. He turns to the doctor, seeking reassurance about his wife's condition. The doctor, with a calm and professional demeanor, informs them that the baby is safe and that Yeonwoo's abdominal pain was a result of the stress caused by her fall down the stairs. An overwhelming sense of relief washes over Yeonwoo, bringing tears to her eyes. Seokheon, standing by her side, takes her hand in his, and they exchange a look of profound relief and gratitude. The doctor, however, mentions that Yeonwoo has sustained some external injuries, which she had failed to notice due to her preoccupation with the baby's well-being. He reveals that Yeonwoo has re-broken the same ankle she had injured a few years prior, according to her medical records, and advises that she should be promptly taken to the orthopedics department for further treatment. At that moment, Jae-shik enters the room, and upon seeing Yeonwoo's tears, he immediately assumes that she is in immense pain from her broken ankle. With a gentle touch, he wipes away her tears, offering comforting words to ease her distress. He then turns to the doctor, explaining that Yeonwoo is not one to complain about anything, so the sight of her crying indicates the severity of her pain. The doctor assures Jae-shik that they will do their utmost to ensure Yeonwoo receives comfortable and effective treatment, providing a measure of relief to the concerned grandfather. Once the doctor takes his leave, Yeonwoo clarifies to Jae-shik that her tears were not a result of her ankle injury but rather a profound sense of relief that Hope, their unborn child, is safe and sound. She confesses that after the fall, she couldn't feel Hope moving, which had filled her with an overwhelming fear that something might have happened to him. Just then, a nurse enters the room, announcing that it is time to take Yeonwoo for an X-ray. As she prepares to leave, Yeonwoo suddenly remembers that she hasn't yet shared with them the truth about Jeonggi's actions. She informs Seokheon and Jae-shik that she has something important to tell them but requests to do so later, once she is settled in her hospital room after receiving treatment. Jae-shik assures her that they will be waiting for her there. Hours pass, and Yeonwoo, now with a splint on her injured ankle, is provided with a wheelchair instead of crutches due to her pregnancy. Seokheon takes it upon himself to wheel her out to the hospital garden, allowing her to get some fresh air. As they sit together, Yeonwoo confides in him that she still can't feel the baby moving. Seokheon, with a reassuring tone, reminds her that the doctor has confirmed that everything is fine and that Hope will undoubtedly be alright. He kneels before her, suggesting that the baby likely takes after him and is therefore strong and resilient. To illustrate his point, Seokheon shares a story from his childhood. When he was just 5 years old, he came across something in a comic book that inspired him to venture up to the balcony of his current room, armed with an umbrella, and jump off. At the time, an elderly man was working as their gardener, and upon witnessing Seokheon's act, he rushed over, screaming in panic. Everyone in the household hurried to Seokheon's side, fearing the worst, but to their surprise, he simply got up, grabbed his umbrella, and ran back into the house. Undeterred, he returned to the balcony and jumped again. Yeonwoo can't help but laugh at Seokheon's entertaining tale, and at that very moment, she feels hope move within her. Seokheon assures her that a little fall wouldn't faze his son, and Yeonwoo, overwhelmed with relief, begins to cry once more. Seokheon gently wipes away her tears, urging her to stop crying, explaining that a mother's tears can make the child feel anxious as well. He shares that he experienced something similar when he was young, which only intensifies Yeonwoo's emotional response, catching Seokheon off guard. He inquires if her ankle is causing her pain, but she assures him that it's not the reason for her tears. As Seokheon holds her close, he tells her not to cry anymore. Yeonwoo, through her tears, expresses that her emotions are not solely because of him, or perhaps they are, but she feels deeply touched by his thoughtful gesture of sharing a comforting story to ease her worries. Seokheon promises to tell her 1,000 more stories if it means she won't cry anymore. Yeonwoo, remembering the important matter she wanted to discuss, reveals to Seokheon that her fall was not an accident but a result of Jeonggi deliberately pushing her down the stairs. Seokheon, shocked by this revelation, listens intently as Yeonwoo recounts the harrowing details of what transpired. Yeonwoo reveals to Seokheon that Jeonggi has been aware of their relationship for a considerable time and had even offered her money to leave him before she ran away. She confesses that she didn't have the means to return the money, and it remains untouched in her bank account. Seokheon, taken aback, inquires if that was the reason she left him, but Yeonwoo clarifies that her departure was not due to his mother. Seokheon interjects, insisting that she should refrain from referring to Jeonggi as mother and that there is no need to bestow any title upon that mentally unstable woman. Yeonwoo further discloses that Jeonggi believed she would interfere with Seokheon's life and had always disapproved of their relationship. She confides that after her return, Jeonggi accused Seokheon of keeping Yeonwoo against her will and suggested that she terminate the pregnancy, even offering to help her leave him. This revelation ignites a spark of anger within Seokheon, and he questions why Yeonwoo didn't inform him earlier. Yeonwoo admits that she was uncertain about what course of action to take at the time. She acknowledges that while she was aware of Jeonggi's dislike for her, she thought that perhaps Jeonggi still held some concern for her as a fellow woman and mother, or maybe it was her way of showing pity given their long-standing acquaintance. Seokheon, however, asserts that if Jeonggi were truly a kind-hearted person, she wouldn't have gone to such lengths to destroy someone else's family. He embraces Yeonwoo, his anger towards Jeonggi simmering beneath the surface, but he resolves to conceal it from Yeonwoo, recognizing the immense hardship she has already endured. He ponders who in their right mind would resort to pushing a pregnant woman down the stairs and implores Yeonwoo to provide a detailed account of the incident. Yeonwoo recounts how Jeonggi forcefully dragged her towards the stairs and pushed her, leaving Seokheon with the unwavering conviction that he cannot allow Jeonggi to continue residing under the same roof as Yeonwoo. As Seokheon accompanies Yeonwoo back to her hospital room, he informs her that he needs to make a brief trip home. Yeonwoo, concerned, inquires if he intends to confront Jeonggi. Seokheon assures her that Jeonggi isn't worth the effort, prompting Yeonwoo to ask about his plans. She cautions him against attempting to resolve the issue on his own, emphasizing that certain boundaries shouldn't be crossed. She also reminds him that, legally, Jeonggi is still his mother, and it wouldn't be appropriate for him to lash out at her completely. As they enter Yeonwoo's room, they are startled to find Jeonggi already there. Jeonggi, with a worried expression etched on her face, asks Yeonwoo if she is all right. Jae-shik, smiling, remarks to Yeonwoo that Jeonggi was so concerned about her well-being that she rushed to see her. Jeonggi takes Yeonwoo's hand and explains that she quickly sorted everything out at home and hurried to the hospital, unable to bear the thought of waiting at home with her worries consuming her. She inquires if it is indeed true that the baby is unharmed. In a swift motion, Seokheon grabs Jeonggi's hand and forcefully pushes her out of the room, causing her to land on her buttocks in the hallway. Jae-shik, outraged, yells at Seokheon, demanding an explanation for his actions and questioning how he could treat a family member in such a manner. The commotion attracts the attention of others in the hallway, who begin whispering among themselves. Jeonggi, seething with rage, demands to know why Seokheon acted in such a way. Seokheon, his voice laced with warning, tells her that if she values a problem-free life, she better not show her face in front of him again. Jeonggi, visibly shaken, quickly stands up and hastily leaves the scene. Jae-shik, still seeking answers, insists that Seokheon provide an immediate explanation for his behavior. Seokheon agrees but first carries Yeonwoo to her bed, stating that he will explain everything after ensuring her comfort. Once Yeonwoo is settled, Jae-shik, growing impatient, urges Seokheon to begin his explanation without further delay. Seokheon, his voice filled with a mix of anger and disbelief, reveals to his grandfather the shocking truth that Jeonggi was responsible for pushing Yeonwoo down the stairs. Jae-shik, taken aback by this revelation, listens in stunned silence as Seokheon further divulges that Jeonggi had even gone so far as to persuade Yeonwoo to terminate her pregnancy. The weight of these words hangs heavy in the air, leaving Jae-shik reeling from the gravity of the situation. Seokheon, his emotions raw and palpable, reminds his grandfather of the painful memory of Jeonggi's actions that led to the loss of his unborn sibling, a day that remains etched in his mind. Jae-shik, grappling with the enormity of the accusations, turns to Yeonwoo, seeking confirmation of Seokheon's claims. With a solemn nod, Yeonwoo affirms the truth of his words, leaving Jae-shik to ponder the unfathomable reasons behind Jeonggi's actions. Seokheon, his voice rising with passion, explains that Jeonggi harbors the belief that Yeonwoo is attempting to drive a wedge between her and their family, a sentiment that likely took root the moment Yeonwoo moved into their home. He emphasizes that this incident is not an isolated occurrence, hinting at a pattern of Jeonggi's troubling behavior, a revelation that catches Jae-shik off guard. Seokheon delves deeper into the disturbing details, disclosing the fact that Jeonggi had even offered Yeonwoo money to leave him, a desperate attempt to sever their bond. With unwavering resolve, Seokheon declares that he refuses to subject his own child to the same tumultuous life he endured and that he has no intention of raising his offspring in the presence of someone like Jeonggi. He presents Jae-shik with an ultimatum, urging him to make a choice between his loyalty to Jeonggi and his support for Seokheon and his family. Seokheon, his emotions raw and exposed, confesses that every time he lays eyes on Jeonggi, he is consumed by a desire to end her life, the wounds inflicted upon his loved ones still fresh and painful. He warns Jae-shik that if he feels compelled to keep Jeonggi around for his own care and comfort, then he and Yeonwoo will have no choice but to move out. With a heavy heart, Seokheon expresses his fear that if he remains under the same roof as Jeonggi, it won't be just his mother's life at risk, but the lives of his wife and child as well, threatened by Jeonggi's destructive actions. Jae-shik, attempting to defuse the tension, tries to calm Seokheon down, but Seokheon remains resolute in his stance, unwilling to compromise on the safety and well-being of his family. With a weary sigh, Jae-shik reaches for his phone and makes a call, leaving Yeonwoo to wonder about the identity of the person on the other end of the line. As Seokheon turns his attention to Yeonwoo and their unborn child, checking on their welfare, Yeonwoo gently places her hand on his lips, silencing him momentarily so she can focus on Jae-shik's conversation. It becomes clear that Jae-shik is speaking with Myung-hun, Jeonggi's husband, and he firmly instructs him to take responsibility for the wife he brought into their home, urging him to remove her from their residence. The call ends abruptly, and Jae-shik turns to Seokheon, telling him to contact Munsan, their household staff, and instruct her to dispose of Jeonggi's belongings outside. Seokheon, however, challenges his grandfather, arguing that as the one who welcomed Jeonggi into their home, Jae-shik should be the one to personally evict her. He reminds Jae-shik of his own words, urging Myung-hun to take responsibility for his actions. Jae-shik, his patience wearing thin, snaps at Seokheon, questioning whether he expects his own employees to handle such a delicate matter. Reluctantly, Seokheon concedes and makes the call to Munsan himself. Munsan, upon answering the phone, immediately inquires about Yeonwoo's well-being. Seokheon informs her of Yeonwoo's ankle injury and instructs her to prepare a bag for Yeonwoo's belongings. He then relays Jae-shik's order to remove Jeonggi's possessions from the house, prompting Jae-shik to interject, reminding Seokheon to leave him out of the conversation. Munsan hesitates, unsure of how to proceed, but Seokheon firmly states that Jeonggi will never set foot in their home again, questioning whether Munsan had witnessed the harm she inflicted upon Yeonwoo. Munsan's mind flashes back to the moment she heard Yeonwoo scream and caught a glimpse of Jeonggi's presence. Seokheon, his voice filled with determination, declares that they are expelling Jeonggi from their lives, and if there aren't enough suitcases to accommodate her belongings, Munsan is free to use his own from storage. The weight of the decision hangs in the air, marking a turning point in their family's dynamics and the beginning of a new chapter, free from Jeonggi's toxic influence. Yeonwoo, her voice filled with concern, seeks reassurance from Jae-shik, questioning whether sending Jeonggi away is truly the right course of action. Jae-shik, his wisdom and experience guiding his words, explains that if Jeonggi's transgressions had been a one-time occurrence, forgiveness might have been possible. However, after a second incident, there is no guarantee that she won't repeat her harmful behavior in the future. With a gentle pat on Yeonwoo's head, Jae-shik promises to ensure that Jeonggi never shows her face in front of Yeonwoo again, urging her to let go of any lingering fear. He then steps out of the room, his phone pressed to his ear, and instructs the person on the other end to cut off all financial support to Jeonggi and ban her from accessing any company properties. With unwavering determination, Jae-shik declares his intention to strip Jeonggi of all her authority. Back at the house, Munsan and Jongin, the other maid, diligently pack Jeonggi's belongings as per Seokheon's orders. Jongin, carefully handling Jeonggi's fur coat, warns Munsan that any damage to the coat would incur Jeonggi's wrath. Munsan, her voice filled with urgency, reminds Jongin that they will likely have to forcibly remove Jeonggi when she returns, so they must act swiftly and place her possessions outside before her arrival. As they complete their task, they carefully arrange Jeonggi's belongings outside the gate. Jongin, her voice tinged with bitterness, remarks that Jeonggi has always been cruel and unkind. Suddenly, Jeonggi's hand lands on Jongin's shoulder, startling the maids. She demands to know what they are discarding. In a panic, the maids quickly retreat inside the house, securing the gate behind them, leaving Jeonggi stunned and bewildered. As she inspects the items outside, realization dawns upon her that they are indeed her own possessions. Disbelief and confusion wash over her as she wonders if they are truly casting her out and if this is a direct order from Jae-shik himself. She frantically rings the bell, desperate for answers. When no one responds to her calls, Jeonggi attempts to reach Munsan, but her efforts are met with silence. Frustration mounting, she dials Jongin's number, her anger palpable. Jongin, her voice trembling, informs Jeonggi that Chairman Lee has ordered them to take this action, leaving them with no choice but to comply. Before Jeonggi can respond, Jongin abruptly ends the call, leaving Jeonggi seething with rage. At that moment, Jeonggi's phone vibrates with an incoming call from her husband, Myung-hun. As she answers, his voice booms through the speaker, his words dripping with disdain as he labels her a crazy woman. He demands to know what she has done to provoke his father into summoning him to retrieve her. Jeonggi, her pride wounded, defiantly declares that this is her home and she has no intention of leaving with him. Myung-hun, his tone scathing, reminds her of her inflated sense of self-importance, always looking down upon others as if she had been his wife from the very beginning. He mocks her current predicament, stating that he had always known she would meet such a fate. Jeonggi, her voice laced with indignation, accuses him of gloating over her misfortune. Myung-hun, his patience wearing thin, chastises her for failing to grasp the gravity of her situation. He emphasizes that his father is a man who would not hesitate to cast out even his own son, let alone someone with no blood ties to the family. Jeonggi, clinging to a shred of hope, insists that Jae-sik would never treat her in such a manner. Myung-hun, his words cutting deep, asks if she truly believes that Jae-sik will have a change of heart about her expulsion when she doesn't share a single drop of blood with him. He coldly informs her that his sole purpose for calling was to provide her with a harsh dose of reality. She is no longer welcome in the house. Jeongi, the weight of his words sinking in, finds herself at a loss, unable to believe the turn of events. Myung-hun, his tone dripping with contempt, admonishes her for her failure to fulfill her role as an obedient daughter-in-law, a task that even Seokheon's mother, despite her depression, managed to accomplish until her untimely death. Jeongi's mind wanders back to the moment when Myung-hun received the news of his wife's passing. She had thought to herself, "Good, now I am the daughter-in-law of the family." Myung-hun, his voice cold and detached, informs Jeongi that he will be sending her divorce papers and advises her to swiftly arrange her living situation. As she begins to protest, he cuts her off, warning her to hold her tongue if she hopes to receive even a meager apartment as alimony. With that, he abruptly ends the call, leaving Jeongi reeling. Jeongi, her mind racing, refuses to accept that Chairman Lee would cast her aside so easily. She convinces herself that this is merely a temporary misunderstanding on his part, and once he returns, she will set the record straight. Determined to take matters into her own hands, she hails a taxi and instructs the driver to take her to Gangnam. As the vehicle navigates the streets, Jeongi's thoughts spiral, realizing that she has nothing left to lose. With a steely resolve, she vows not to let things end in this manner, her mind already plotting her next move. As the days pass by, Jeongi makes several attempts to visit Yeonwoo at the hospital, but her efforts prove futile, as she is never able to catch a glimpse of her. Unbeknownst to Yeonwoo, Jeongi's presence at the hospital goes unnoticed, her visits shrouded in secrecy. When the day of Yeonwoo's discharge arrives, she finds herself lost in thought during the journey home, questioning whether the decision to expel Jeongi from their lives was the right choice and if they can finally find solace in the aftermath. As they step into the house, the maids eagerly welcome Yeonwoo, their concern for her well-being evident in their inquiries about her injured leg. Yeonwoo, touched by their genuine care, assures them that she is doing fine and expresses her gratitude for their thoughtfulness. Jae-sik, with a gentle yet firm tone, suggests that Yeonwoo should relocate to the first-floor bedroom from this point forward. Seokheon, his eyes narrowing, shoots a piercing glare in Jae-sik's direction. Unfazed, Jae-sik meets his gaze head-on, questioning how Yeonwoo is expected to navigate the stairs with her injured leg. Seokheon, his voice tinged with irritation, points out that Jae-sik is essentially asking Yeonwoo to occupy Jeongi's room. Jae-sik, sensing the discomfort that such a request might bring to Yeonwoo, offers a compromise, stating that he will take up residence in the room instead. He further explains that he has been harboring concerns about Yeonwoo ascending the stairs in her advanced state of pregnancy and had been contemplating a room switch to ensure her safety and comfort. Yeonwoo, her mind still grappling with the recent events, inquires about Jeongi's whereabouts. Jae-sik informs her that Jeongi hasn't made any contact with him since her departure, acknowledging the depth of her distress. However, according to the information he has received, Jeongi has taken up residence in Myung-hun's apartment located in the upscale Gangnam district. Yeonwoo, her brow furrowing, recalls Myung-hun's behavior during her brief stay there, and a twinge of sympathy for Jeongi's plight begins to surface within her. Jae-sik, his voice laced with a tinge of regret, remarks that married couples should be living together, questioning the existence of love between a husband and wife when they lead separate lives like strangers. He emphasizes that Jeongi and Myung-hun should have been cohabiting from the very beginning. Jae-sik continues, acknowledging that it was not right to keep Jeongi with them while allowing her and Myung-hun to maintain a relationship devoid of genuine feelings for each other. He suggests that if they are to be together after his passing, they should take this opportunity to spend quality time alone and nurture their bond. Turning his attention to Yeonwoo, Jae-sik reassures her that she should not shoulder the blame for Jeongi's departure and instead focus on her own recovery. With a gentle pat on her shoulder, he encourages her to get some much-needed rest. Seokheon, ever attentive, wheels Yeonwoo into their new room and carefully lifts her from the wheelchair, his actions filled with tender care. Yeonwoo, touched by his gentle handling, can't help but feel the depth of his affection for her in every movement. Concerned about Seokheon's well-being, Yeonwoo inquires if he isn't exhausted from working through the night during their hospital stay. Seokheon admits that he is currently preoccupied with the dam construction project in Vietnam, his workload demanding his attention. Yeonwoo, her heart aching at the sight of his fatigue, reaches out to caress his face, her touch conveying her worry. Seokheon, realizing that his late-night work might have disturbed her sleep, expresses his regret for working in the hospital room. Yeonwoo, a hint of playfulness in her voice, asks if he is unaware of her light sleeping habits. Seokheon, intrigued, questions if she is indeed a light sleeper. When Yeonwoo remains silent, he prods her further, curious about her reluctance to answer. She turns away, feigning disinterest, but can't resist sneaking a glance at him, only to find him still patiently waiting for her response. In those quiet moments of the night, Yeonwoo would often find herself watching Seokheon's peaceful face whenever his movements roused her from slumber. Seokheon, his arms encircling her, confesses that he feels as though Do-kyung knows her better than he does. Yeonwoo, quick to dismiss the notion, asserts that Do-kyung doesn't truly know her. Seokheon, however, reminds her of Do-kyung's familiarity with her preferences for porridge and soda, acknowledging that even after 2 years together, he still has much to learn about her. As he gently lays her on the bed, Seokheon expresses his desire to seize this opportunity to deepen his understanding of her. Yeonwoo, her curiosity piqued, inquires about his intentions. Seokheon, a mischievous glint in his eye, declares that he will begin by exploring her body, his words hinting at the intimate connection they share and the desire to unravel the mysteries that still lie between them. As Seokheon's words hang in the air, Yeonwoo, a playful lilt in her voice, questions whether he doesn't already possess a thorough understanding of her body. Seokheon, his eyes twinkling with mischief, counters her query by quoting the age-old adage, reminding her that even the most incredible journeys begin with a single step. He confesses that she is the first person he has ever taken the time to truly know, admitting that the novelty of the experience makes it a challenging yet rewarding endeavor. His lips trace a path along her skin, leaving a trail of gentle kisses in their wake. As he reaches her stomach, his hand rests upon the growing life within, and he muses aloud that he will have the opportunity to get to know their little one once he is born. However, he quickly adds, with a hint of amusement, that since the baby is his son, he will likely be a mirror image of himself, leaving little to discover. Seokheon's thoughts wander, and he finds himself feeling grateful that Yeonwoo is carrying a boy. He admits to himself that if their child were a daughter, possessing the same captivating qualities as Yeonwoo, he wouldn't be able to resist showering her with constant attention and affection. His curiosity piqued, Seokheon inquires about the meaning behind the line that adorns the center of Yeonwoo's stomach. She explains that while she isn't entirely certain of its significance, it is a common occurrence among pregnant women. Seokheon, his voice tinged with a mix of wonder and trepidation, confesses that sometimes, the sight of that line fills him with a sense of fear, as if the baby might suddenly split it open and make its grand entrance into the world. He leans in, his lips meeting hers in a tender kiss, and pleads with her not to be angry with him for his lack of knowledge about her. Yeonwoo, taken aback by his words, questions when she has ever displayed anger towards him. Seokheon, his voice softening, admits that while few things in this world truly frighten him, the prospect of incurring her wrath terrifies him to his core. He also acknowledges his limited understanding of the physical changes that accompany pregnancy, which fuels his constant state of anxiety and unease. However, unbeknownst to Seokheon, Yeonwoo is well aware of the countless hours he has dedicated to poring over pregnancy and childbirth books, seeking to expand his knowledge and alleviate his concerns. In a moment of pure vulnerability, Seokheon expresses his desire to have not just one, but 2 or even 3 children with her, his heart yearning to create a family that is uniquely theirs. As their bodies intertwine, lost in the throes of passion, they find solace in each other's embrace. In the afterglow of their intimacy, Seokheon, his voice heavy with emotion, confesses that in the past, he often found himself wishing for Yeonwoo to be pregnant, longing to forge an unbreakable bond between them, even if it meant tying her to him through the creation of new life. He also admits, with a tinge of sadness, that witnessing her diligently taking birth control pills filled him with a sense of melancholy, yet he found solace in the knowledge that their ability to be intimate would have been hindered had she been expecting. Yeonwoo, her voice soft and uncertain, reveals that she has heard whispers of husbands who find intimacy with their pregnant wives unappealing, and she cautiously inquires if Seokheon harbors similar sentiments. Without hesitation, he assures her that such thoughts have never crossed his mind, and he proceeds to demonstrate his unwavering desire for her. Seokheon steps out of the bathroom, his body wrapped in a cozy robe, and makes his way to the bed where Yeonwoo is fast asleep, looking like a peaceful angel. He gently brushes a strand of hair from her face, his mind wandering to their future together. He promises himself that once they're married, she'll be all his, and he'll do everything in his power to give her and their little one the happiest life imaginable. Just as he's lost in thought, his phone starts ringing, and one glance at the caller ID is enough to sour his mood. He steps out to take the call, and as soon as he answers, his father's voice blasts through the speaker, cursing up a storm. Myung-hun demands to know if Seokheon was the one who kicked his stepmother out, and when Seokheon confirms it, Myung-hun loses it. He yells at Seokheon to take Jeonggi back, saying he can't stand the sight of her. Met with silence, Myung-hun repeats himself, and Seokheon, fed up, asks why he's being told to deal with his father's woman. As Myung-hun starts to yell again, Seokheon cuts him off, telling him to hash it out with Jae-shik instead. He makes it clear that he has nothing to say to the likes of him. Myung-hun pulls the respect your father card, but Seokheon's not having it. This prompts Myung-hun to warn Seokheon that his own kid will end up throwing him away someday. Seokheon, with a sarcastic edge, says he can't wait to see his son take after him, adding that at least he won't grow up to be a scumbag like Myung-hun. And with that, he hangs up. Seokheon changes into his pajamas and checks on Yeonwoo, who's still sound asleep despite claiming to be a light sleeper. He then instructs the maids to keep his father out of the house too. Afterwards, he heads to Jae-shik's room and finds him on the phone with Myung-hun. Jae-shik's laying down the law, telling Myung-hun to man up and handle his own wife, and that their marital problems are none of his business. Myung-hun says something, and Jae-shik fires back, threatening to sue him for all the damage he's caused the company if he dares to call again. He advises Myung-hun to use his brain, if he has one, before hanging up. Jae-shik comments to Seokheon about Myung-hun's immature behavior, and Seokheon, with a tinge of bitterness, wonders if he ever really had a father, a sentiment Jae-shik understands all too well. Seizing the moment, Seokheon asks for some vacation time, which catches Jae-shik off guard. Jae-shik reminds him how swamped they are, but Seokheon assures him he can sign off on things remotely. He points out that he hasn't taken a single day off since becoming an executive director, and with his first child on the way, he hasn't had a chance to take Yeonwoo anywhere special. Jae-shik, skeptical, asks how Seokheon plans to travel with a girl on crutches, but Seokheon's determined to carry her everywhere. Jae-shik finally gives in and grants Seokheon a week off, promising to handle everything at the office so he won't have to worry about signing anything. Seokheon can't help but think that if he were the one with a broken leg, his grandfather would have told him to wheel himself to work. But when it comes to Yeonwoo, Jae-shik's a total softie. The next day, Seokheon surprises Yeonwoo with the news of their upcoming vacation, and she's totally caught off guard but super excited. She can't wait to see what adventures await them, and her heart's bursting with joy at the thought of spending quality time with her man. Yeonwoo, her eyes wide with excitement, asks Seokheon if they're really going on a trip together. He reminds her with a playful smile that she had mentioned wanting to travel, which was the excuse she gave him when she ran away. As he bustles around, packing their belongings, he confesses that when she first disappeared, he genuinely believed she had gone on a journey. Yeonwoo, sensing a hint of unresolved hurt in his voice, tentatively asks if he's still upset about that. Seokheon admits that he is, causing a flicker of sadness to cross Yeonwoo's face. But then he flashes her a reassuring grin, telling her that's precisely why he wants them to embark on this adventure together, to create new memories and heal old wounds. Once they're settled in the car, Yeonwoo's curiosity gets the better of her, and she inquires about their destination and how he managed to take time off work. Seokheon assures her that grandfather Jae-shik will handle everything in his absence. Suddenly, it dawns on Yeonwoo that Jae-shik was in on the plan all along, which explains the pocket money he had slipped her that very morning. She realizes that he must have left for the office to cover for Seokheon, allowing them this precious time together. Seokheon turns to Yeonwoo, his eyes sparkling with anticipation, and asks her where her heart desires to go. Yeonwoo, a bit taken aback, asks if he hadn't already meticulously planned out their itinerary. With a mischievous grin, Seokheon reveals that he spontaneously decided to let her choose their destination, despite the extensive preparations he had made for their trip. He explains that he heard once she gives birth, her opportunities to venture outside will be limited, so they need to make the most of their freedom while they still can. Intrigued by his newfound knowledge, Yeonwoo inquires about the source of this information. Seokheon proudly holds up a book titled One Stop Prep for Childbirth, causing Yeonwoo's eyebrows to raise in surprise. When she asks when he started delving into such literature, he credits Yoonseon for leaving the book on his desk. Yeonwoo's mind drifts back to the invaluable support Yoonseon provided when Seokheon brought her back home. From overseeing the move of Seokheon's belongings from her studio apartment to ensuring Yeonwoo had all the essentials she needed, Yoonseon's kindness and thoughtfulness had left a lasting impression on her. As Yeonwoo rummages through the glove compartment, she discovers an array of books, their titles all centered around giving birth alone or in emergency situations. Seokheon, ever the diligent father-to-be, emphasizes the importance of being prepared for any eventuality. Yeonwoo, amused by his dedication, points out that emergency births are incredibly rare. Seokheon, undeterred, declares that he's simply doing everything in his power to be the best dad he can be. With a carefree spirit, Seokheon decides to drive without a specific destination in mind, embracing the thrill of spontaneity. Yeonwoo, lost in thought, realizes that she can't remember the last time she embarked on a leisurely trip. Even during her solitary days, she was so focused on moving forward that she never took the time to pause and explore the world around her. Unbeknownst to the blissful couple, another car with suspicious-looking men trails closely behind them. The one donning a blue hoodie quickly dials Jeonggi's number, informing her that Yeonwoo and Seokheon have left the house. Jeonggi, her voice laced with malice, instructs him to proceed with her orders. As she ends the call, her thoughts turn bitter, reflecting on how Chairman Lee never allows someone back into his good graces once he's cast them aside. She seethes at the injustice of being kicked out after all she's done for the family. With a chilling determination, she vows to herself that she will ensure Yeonwoo and Seokheon are pushed into the abyss, just as they did to her, her heart consumed by a thirst for revenge. Hours later, Seokheon gently rouses Yeonwoo from her slumber, greeting her with her favorite soda in hand. As they sip on the refreshing beverage, Seokheon admits that initially, he wasn't a fan of the drink, finding it too watered down for his taste. However, he confesses that it's growing on him with each sip. Yeonwoo, surprised by his revelation, asks if he's tried the soda before. Seokheon confirms that he has, and his mind drifts back to the moment when Do-kyeon got under his skin by mentioning that he knew about Yeonwoo's love for this particular soda and egg porridge, while Seokheon himself was unaware. Yeonwoo, recalling that day, remarks on how scary Seokheon was in that moment. He acknowledges that he never thought he would end up so broken. With a sincere look in her eyes, Yeonwoo promises Seokheon that she won't deceive him again, expressing her deep remorse. Seokheon, in turn, apologizes for his own actions and vows never to do anything that would upset her in the future. They clasp hands, their eyes locked in a loving gaze, smiling at each other for a lingering moment before continuing their journey. A few hours later, they arrive at a location that strikes Yeonwoo as oddly familiar. As recognition dawns on her, she turns to Seokheon, her eyes wide with surprise. Seokheon simply smiles back at her, a knowing twinkle in his eye. Yeonwoo takes in the surroundings with a sense of amazement, and Seokheon encourages her to explore the place she's been curious about. As he wheels her closer, Seokheon reflects on the realization that he came to understand too late. The reason behind Yeonwoo's support for Do-kyung's business was her genuine love for plants. Sura, who is working outside the greenhouse, catches sight of Yeonwoo and is taken aback. When she notices Seokheon, she grows concerned, asking Yeonwoo if he isn't the bad man who hurt her. She urges Yeonwoo to come to her quickly, wondering if the wheelchair is preventing her from doing so. Yeonwoo, realizing that Sura hasn't heard from her since she left, laughs off her worries, assuring her not to be so concerned. Sura, still skeptical, questions if Seokheon has drugged Yeonwoo. At that moment, Seokheon emerges from the greenhouse alongside Do-kyung, inquiring about the commotion. Sura, seeking protection, hides behind Seokheon, identifying Seokheon as the bad man who took Yeonwoo away. Do-kyung acknowledges Seokheon's presence with a nod, which Seokheon reciprocates, much to Yeonwoo's surprise. Do-kyung then reveals to Seokheon that he's been anticipating his arrival, as Seokheon had mentioned he would be coming with Yeonwoo. Yeonwoo, puzzled, asks Do-kyung if he and Seokheon have been in contact. Do-kyung confirms that they have and begins inquiring about Yeonwoo's well-being and the progress of her pregnancy. As they engage in conversation, Seokheon's mind wanders back to the moment when he called Do-kyung to apologize for all the trouble he had caused. Meanwhile, Yeonwoo strikes up a conversation with Seokheon, who expresses concern about her injured leg. She shares the story of what happened, and they offer their sympathies. Throughout the exchange, Seokheon silently reflects on the lengths he would go to for Yeonwoo. He knows in his heart that he would repeat his actions 100 times over if it meant having her by his side once again. The bond between them, forged through trials and triumphs, is unbreakable, and Seokheon is determined to cherish and protect their love, no matter what challenges may lie ahead. Sura, still grappling with the revelation, turns to Do-kyung and asks if Seokheon isn't the bad man she believed him to be. Seokheon, with a gentle smile, explains that Seokheon is actually Yeonwoo's husband and the father of her unborn child. Sura's eyes widen in shock, struggling to process this new information. She questions if Do-kyung isn't the father, but he shakes his head, reminding her that he had already clarified this in the past. Sura, still wary, stares at Seokheon, and when he offers her a friendly smile, she quickly seeks refuge behind Seokheon once more. Yeonwoo, her heart heavy with guilt, takes Sura's hand in hers. She expresses her regret for not being there to help build the nursery, apologizing for leaving abruptly and not being present when Sura needed her the most. Do-kyung, sensing Yeonwoo's remorse, kneels before her, his voice filled with gratitude. He assures her that without her initial support and guidance, they wouldn't have come this far. He excitedly shares that the nursery has hit the jackpot with the philodendrons Yeonwoo had secured for them. As soon as the plants were imported, orders started pouring in from all over the country, forcing them to expand their team to keep up with the demand. Yeonwoo, amazed by the sight of numerous boxes ready for shipment, inquires if they are all orders going out that day. Do-kyung nods, crediting Yeonwoo's keen eye for plants. He admits that his original plan was to focus solely on importing and selling large, high-profit margin plants, but Yeonwoo's insights have proven invaluable. He attributes their success to her guidance and takes her on a tour of the nursery, showcasing the thriving plants she had recommended for their import list. Yeonwoo marvels at the lush greenery, and Do-kyung promises to send her a pot of flowers once he starts breeding more varieties. As Seokheon and Yeonwoo prepare to depart, Sura presents Yeonwoo with a thoughtful gift, 2 bottles of coconut oil from her hometown. She explains that the oil is meant to soothe Yeonwoo's itchy, stretching skin during pregnancy and help prevent stretch marks. Yeonwoo, touched by the gesture, thanks Sura for her kindness. In return, Sura makes Yeonwoo promise to send pictures once the baby is born, eager to share in the joy of the new arrival. Seokheon, ever the attentive husband, carefully helps Yeonwoo into the car. Before leaving, he extends a handshake to Do-kyung, bidding him farewell. Do-kyung, in turn, reassures Yeonwoo that she needn't worry about them, as they are thriving and that the challenges they faced have ultimately proven to be a blessing in disguise. As they drive away, Yeonwoo's phone chimes with a message from Do-kyung. He informs her that Seokheon has placed a substantial order, hinting at the financial success that awaits them. Yeonwoo, lost in thought, reflects on the role Do-kyung played in her life during her darkest hours. She acknowledges that he was someone she could rely on, a constant source of support. However, after their encounter, Yeonwoo comes to a profound realization: Seokheon is the one who holds the deepest place in her heart. Their love, tested and strengthened through adversity, shines brighter than ever, and Yeonwoo knows that together, they can face any challenge that comes their way. Yeonwoo, her curiosity piqued, asks Seokheon about his order from Do-kyung's shop. Seokheon, with a playful glint in his eye, teasingly asks if she's worried about her husband making a purchase from her former love's business. Yeonwoo laughs, assuring him that she's simply intrigued. Seokheon reveals that Myri Construction has recently completed a new building, and he's been considering decorating the lobby with plants. He even shares his idea of creating a dedicated department for plants within the company, which takes Yeonwoo by surprise. Seokheon delves deeper into the connection between architecture and plants, explaining how he discovered their intricate relationship while researching the expansion of the orchid garden. He enthusiastically outlines his plans to incorporate this concept into future construction projects, his passion for the subject evident in his words. When Yeonwoo inquires about the specific order he placed with Do-kyung, Seokheon reveals that he requested a stunning 3-meter vertical garden to be installed in the lobby of the new building in East Ikondong. He also mentions his intention to seek Do-kyung's expertise and advice when they begin constructing the interior, as they will require the assistance of a knowledgeable expert to maintain the plants. Yeonwoo, her heart swelling with happiness and gratitude, realizes that Seokheon has not only mended his relationship with Do-kyung but is also making a genuine effort to atone for his past actions. She fondly recalls Sura's shocked reaction upon seeing Seokheon and can't help but chuckle at the memory of Sura brandishing a broom at him. Seokheon, amused, admits that he had never been labeled a villain before. Yeonwoo, with a mischievous grin, tells him that when he scowls, he surpasses the mere title of a villain and transforms into the devil himself. As their journey continues, Seokheon pulls into a rest stop, allowing Yeonwoo to use the restroom. Despite her insistence that she can manage on her own with the wheelchair, Seokheon insists on carrying her in his arms, ignoring her protests. Yeonwoo, glancing around the parking lot, feels a sense of relief upon realizing that they are the only ones present. Once inside the restroom, Seokheon meticulously wipes down the toilet seat, his protective nature on full display. Yeonwoo assures him that rest stop bathrooms are typically well maintained, but Seokheon remains adamant, refusing to let her sit on a surface touched by countless strangers. Yeonwoo suggests that he wait outside, but Seokheon, ever the vigilant husband, refuses to leave her side, concerned about her moving around too much. When Yeonwoo assures him that she'll be fine, Seokheon raises the possibility of someone hiding in the restroom, prompting her to ask him to check. Seeing his unwavering determination to stay, Yeonwoo relents but makes him turn around while she relieves herself. After she finishes, Seokheon carries her back to the car and leaves her there while he takes his turn in the restroom, where he attends to his own needs. By the time he returns, he finds Yeonwoo peacefully sleeping in the passenger seat. With a tender smile, he carefully drapes a blanket over her and places a gentle kiss on her head, his love for her evident in every gesture. Few hours later, Yeonwoo stirs from her deep slumber, finding herself in the cozy bedroom of Jae-shik's vacation home. She must have been totally wiped out, because she has no idea how she even got into the room. Her eyes drift over to Seokheon, who's sleeping beside her, looking just like a big, cute puppy. After freshening up, Yeonwoo decides to take a nice stroll along the beach, thinking about how it's been forever since she's been on a trip. As she touches her stomach, she can't help but imagine coming back here with Seokheon and their future baby, Hope. Out of nowhere, Seokheon swoops in and scoops her up, asking why she's walking all by herself. Yeonwoo tells him a light walk is no big deal, but he's not having it and refuses to put her down. Instead, he suggests they take the coastal road to Seokheon, and she's all for it, thinking they can grab a bite to eat there. On the way, Yeonwoo brings up the idea of trying some seokguk, a tasty soup made with shelled mussels. Seokheon, knowing she's not a big fan of seafood, tries to steer her towards something more her style. But Yeonwoo surprises him by saying her taste buds might have changed thanks to the pregnancy, and she thinks Hope must take after Seokheon since her dislike for seafood has vanished. Seokheon grips the steering wheel, determined to get Yeonwoo whatever she's craving. At the restaurant, Yeonwoo scans the menu, picking out dishes that catch her eye. Meanwhile, Seokheon can't help but wonder if anyone in his life has ever cared for him and loved him as much as she does. He gets a little emotional and wipes his eyes, which makes Yeonwoo worry and ask if something's wrong. At first, Seokheon plays it off, but when Yeonwoo keeps pressing, he admits that he feels bad for not even knowing her favorite food, despite how well she knows him. He questions what he's been doing all this time, realizing he's been more focused on keeping her close than actually getting to know her. Yeonwoo takes his hand and reminds him that they're getting married next year and will have plenty of time to learn about each other while raising Hope. She encourages him to stay determined to understand her better, promising that as long as he keeps that desire, he'll start noticing things he missed before. As they enjoy their meal, Seokheon sees how much Yeonwoo loves the seafood dishes and realizes he needs to switch up his plans and take her on a seafood tour to cater to her new tastes. After lunch, they order some sweet and spicy fried chicken to go, and as they head to the hotel, Yeonwoo suddenly stops and asks if their place has a pool. When Seokheon says yes, she suggests buying swimsuits before checking in, eyeing a nearby swimwear store. Seokheon spots a matching pair of pineapple-covered swimsuits and jokingly asks if that's what she has in mind, only for Yeonwoo to tell him they're cute. He tries to convince her to get swimsuits at the hotel, not quite sure he can pull off the pineapple look. Yeonwoo worries that the hotel might not have swimsuits that work for pregnant women and asks the shopkeeper about styles without open backs. When the shopkeeper says they have some, Seokheon realizes Yeonwoo wants a swimsuit that'll cover the scars on her back. He takes her hand and leads her into the store, ready to help her find the perfect swimwear for their pool adventure. In the hotel room, Seokheon can't help but feel a bit awkward in his new swimsuit. Yeonwoo, on the other hand, is more concerned about her scars being visible. She lets her hair down, complaining that even with the most covering swimsuit she could find, her hair scars are still noticeable. She asks Seokheon if her hair manages to cover them up, and he wonders why she's so worried. Yeonwoo explains that people might be shocked to see her back, especially the kids at the hotel, who could be terrified by the sight. Hearing this makes Seokheon's heart ache. He takes a moment to ensure her hair covers her back well and tells her not to stress about it, encouraging her to just have fun. When they reach the pool, Seokheon jumps right in, splashing Yeonwoo with water. He playfully asks if she's coming in, while the women nearby can't help but admire Seokheon's attractiveness. He grabs Yeonwoo's legs, urging her to join him, and then scoops her up and carries her into the pool. Yeonwoo mentions that some women were talking about how hot he is, and he just smiles, saying it's nothing new. She remarks that it must be nice to have everyone's eyes on him all the time, and he teasingly asks if she's jealous. Yeonwoo denies it, saying she couldn't handle living like that with her personality. He accuses her of being jealous again, but she stands her ground. Then, out of nowhere, he plants a kiss on her head, making her blush. When he confesses that he's aroused, Yeonwoo is shocked and swims away, telling him to deal with it on his own. Seokheon chases after her and catches up. As they swim together, Seokheon can't help but think about how fascinating it is that they used to have such an intense love-hate relationship, but now, just being together feels so comforting and fulfilling. Suddenly, Yeonwoo worries that her scars must be showing since her hair is wet. Seokheon immediately swims out of the pool, telling her to wait, which annoys her as she thinks he's just messing with her again. But a moment later, he returns with a towel, which he uses to cover her back and then packs her hair. He admits that he doesn't fully understand why she feels the need to hide her scars, but all he wants is for her to be comfortable. They sit by the pool, chatting about the beach, and Yeonwoo asks if he'll go with her next time. Seokheon is touched by her request. She gently strokes his face, saying that even though she doesn't always know why he makes certain expressions, she'll take this one as a yes, and she loves him so much too. Seokheon wraps her in a hug, promising to take her to the beach as many times as she desires. As Yeonwoo wakes up from her nap, she finds herself alone in the car. Looking around, she realizes the car is parked in front of a nursery. Carefully, she gets out and makes her way inside. To her surprise, an old man calls out her name. It's Mr. Chung-soo. She asks him what he's doing there and remarks on how it feels like just yesterday she was running off to school, but now she's becoming a mother, which is wonderful. Mr. Chung-soo mentions that when her husband called, he wondered if they would actually come, but he didn't expect them to arrive so soon. When Yeonwoo inquires about her husband, Mr. Chung-soo tells her he's doing something at the moment. She notices the orchids growing in the nursery, and he explains that he never expected to be growing moth orchids, but some folks have been looking for them again. He also shares that he used to doubt growing orchids the way her grandpa, Mr. Seo, taught him, but now he's making a living off of them. Yeonwoo recognizes the orchids as the ones named after her, the Yeonwoo orchids. Just as she asks why he has them, Seokheon arrives and Mr. Chung-soo reveals that her husband contacted him to raise them, saying he's almost as good at it as Mr. Seo. Seokheon, concerned about Yeonwoo being out of the car, carries her in his arms and asks for directions to the bathroom. As they leave, Mr. Chung-soo reflects on how he was worried about Yeonwoo living on her own after Mr. Seo passed away, but now it seems she's found a good home and a loving husband. When they return, Mr. Chung-soo has already loaded 16 pots of Yeonwoo orchids into their car. Yeonwoo expresses her surprise at not knowing he grew these orchids, and Mr. Chung-soo starts to reply but stops. She then asks if she can look around the nursery, saying it reminds her of her grandpa and she wants to explore a bit. Seokheon clears his throat, and she wonders if she can't. She starts reminiscing about her childhood and talking about flowers. Seokheon agrees to look around, and Mr. Chung-soo asks if it wouldn't be an issue for him. Seokheon carries Yeonwoo into the nursery, where she's surprised to see a massive amount of Yeonwoo orchids, the largest and most coveted moth orchids in the world, named after her by her grandpa when he didn't know what else to call them. She remembers her grandpa's dream of growing an abundance of Yeonwoo orchids and having them distributed in the market. Mr. Chung-soo tells Yeonwoo that he said the orchids were a secret project, and he didn't think she would find out quickly. When she asks what he's talking about, he reveals that Seokheon requested he grow the Yeonwoo orchids for their wedding, wanting to decorate the hall with the orchids her grandpa bred. Touched by this gesture, Yeonwoo listens as Mr. Chung-soo continues, saying he assumed the wedding would be huge, so he had to set up a large nursery. Seokheon had requested the orchids last September, meaning it's been about a year since he started growing them. Mr. Chung-soo continues by saying that after what happened to Mr. Seo, he felt a piece of his heart was missing, but thanks to raising the orchids has made him feel whole again. He proceeds to talk about how Mr. Seo was a great help to him after he moved from his hometown. She starts to cry as she thinks that she thought everyone would forget all about her grandpa and his flowers as time went by. She would never have imagined that someone would remember him, raise his flowers and even get those flowers to celebrate her marriage. Seokheon asks her if her tears are tears of joy, and she tells him that she is crying because she is so happy. She thinks that she feels incredibly loved, and to think that her love would get returned to her in such an incredibly huge way. Days later, Yeonwoo tells Jae-shik about Seokheon commissioning someone to grow Yeonwoo's orchids, which surprises him. He tells her that he scolded Seokheon for taking his Yeonwoo orchids the previous year, and never brought it back. He also tells Yeonwoo that he wasn't feeling too great marrying her off to his troublesome grandson, and Seokheon tells Jae-shik that he can hear him before going back to his gardening. Jae-shik continues by saying that seeing Seokheon now, he supposed that he knows how to treat his lady right. Yeonwoo tells him that Jae-shik takes after him, and when Jae-shik asks her if Seokheon treats her well, she yes, and asks Hope if he agrees. Jae-shik watches her with a smile on his face as he thinks that even though he failed to raise his son well, at least Ho's grandson grew up to be a fine man, and he even has himself a wife who supports him. He asks Yeonwoo if she took any pictures during the trip, and she shows him all the pictures Seokheon took of her. The following day, in a car parked outside Jae-shik's house, one of the men who have been watching Yeonwoo tells Jeonggi through the phone that Yeonwoo has only been inside the house, and they can't do anything yet until she comes out. Jeonggi yells at the man, Mr. Cheon, asking if he is expecting her to believe that, and says that Yeonwoo is in her last trimester so she should be going to the hospital often, and if he keeps making excuses, she take her money back. Mr. Cheon assures her that he will have good news for her soon, and tells her to wait a little longer. When he ends the call, he angrily complains to his partner that working with Jeonggi is going to drive him insane. He complains about her yelling all the time, and the other man tells him to learn how to tolerate her. Mr. Cheon says that once the job is over, he will make Jeonggi pay with everything she has. Just then, a taxi pulls up in front of Jae-shik's house, and Yeonwoo steps out, and the man calls their backup to tell them that their target is on the move. Yeonwoo texts Seokheon, telling him that she is in a taxi and gives him the license plate number, while wondering if she is really going to get her maternity photos taken. Jae-shik had asked Seokheon if they weren't going to take maternity photos, but she didn't expect Seokheon to book the photo shoot as soon as Jae-shik mentioned it. Seokheon calls her, and when she picks, he complains about there not being any available driver to drive her. She tells him that she can get there fine, and he tells her that the makeup artist is already at the studio, so she should get her makeup done as soon as she arrives and he will soon get there. Before they end the call, he tells her to text him when she arrives. Then suddenly a car parks in front of the taxi, making the driver to quickly step on the brake. He asks Yeonwoo, and when she says that she is fine, he steps out of the car, saying he will speak with the driver of the other car. At that moment, a man wearing a mask opens Yeonwoo's side of the door, surprising her. About an hour later, Seokheon and Jae-shik stride into the studio, ready to meet up with Yeonwoo. But there's tension in the dressing room. The makeup artists are huddled together, whispering worriedly. As soon as Seokheon enters, they turn to him with concerned expressions on their faces. One of them hesitantly explains that Yeonwoo hasn't arrived yet, and they tried calling but her phone is off. This surprises Seokheon and Jae-shik, as it's unlike Yeonwoo. Seokheon immediately calls Yoonseon, filling her in on the situation and sending the details of the taxi Yeonwoo took. Jae-shik paces nearby, wondering what could be going on. Minutes tick by before Yoonseon calls back, her voice tense as she relays what the taxi driver told her. There was an accident on the way to the studio, and the driver was going to transfer Yeonwoo to another cab. But when he stepped out to deal with the other driver involved in the accident, Yeonwoo disappeared. Seokheon's face hardens with determination. Without saying a word, he pivots and starts heading for the exit. Jae-shik calls out, questioning where he's going. Seokheon pauses, jaw clenched, convinced that Jeonggi is behind this. He asks Jae-shik if Jeonggi is staying with his father. Jae-shik nods slowly, realizing if they want to play dirty tactics, they'll have to fight fire with fire. A few minutes later, a naked Myung-hun is dragged by some men into the sitting room, where Jae-shik is seated while Seokheon stands beside him. Jae-shik inquires about Jeonggi's whereabouts, which infuriates Myung-hun. He yells at his father, questioning why he would ask about Jeonggi when they have been living separately for ages. Myung-hun demands to know why Jae-shik would drag his own son out in front of subordinates because of Jeonggi. Seokheon interjects, telling his father to shut his mouth. He asks if Myung-hun has forgotten who brought Jeonggi into their family and how much Yeonwoo has suffered because of her. Enraged, Myung-hun yells insults at Seokheon, calling him a good-for-nothing punk for daring to speak to his father that way. Seokheon calls for Mr. Namgung to bring his father to the table. As Myung-hun hurls curses, Seokheon glares, saying he can no longer deal with him. Myung-hun pleads with Jae-shik to intervene, but his relief turns to dread when Jae-shik instructs Mr. Namgung to fetch a cleaver. Gripping the cleaver, Jae-shik tells Myung-hun he should have castrated him sooner to prevent him from disgracing the family. Tears streaming, the terrified Myung-hun apologizes profusely. When pressed about Jeonggi's location, he reveals she left 2 days ago after receiving alimony. As Jae-shik raises the cleaver, the sobbing Myung-hun begs for forgiveness. Just as Jae-shik brings the cleaver down, Myung-hun cries out that Jeonggi is at Incheon port, pleading for the cleaver to be lowered, which Jae-shik obliges. Myung-hun explains he bugged Jeonggi's room after someone called her daily, overhearing her plan to stow away on a ship to China. Seokheon immediately calls Yoonseon, instructing her to search for ships leaving Incheon for China at 2 p.m., before walking away. As Jae-shik departs, he tells Myung-hun that by recording Jeonggi, he knew all along what was happening yet turned a blind eye. He orders one of the men to castrate Myung-hun and discard him at a nearby hospital to ensure he cannot philander again. Myung-hun's pleas for mercy fall on deaf ears as he is castrated. At Incheon port, a gleeful Jeonggi, hidden in a container, revels that this is the price for crossing her, believing Yeonwoo and her baby got their deserved fate. Suddenly, the container opens, startling her. 2 men grab her as she demands to know what they're doing, claiming she paid them. Then Seokheon steps forward, having found her. Jeonggi stares at Seokheon in shock as he yells, demanding to know Yeonwoo's whereabouts. She laughs it off, saying it's always about Yeonwoo, but agrees to tell him if he gets his men to release her. Seokheon signals them to let her go. Once free, Jeonggi reaches into her pocket and pulls out a phone. She calls the kidnappers, instructing them to forget the knife and burn Yeonwoo to death slowly instead. Before anyone can stop her, she smashes the phone on the floor. Seokheon picks up the phone, trying frantically to turn it on, while Jeonggi laughs mockingly that he brought this upon himself. He manages to power it on, but there are no numbers saved, prompting him to hit the floor in frustration. He demands Jeonggi provide the kidnapper's number. She smiles slyly, questioning what's in it for her. When Seokheon threatens to end her life, she dares him to try. He pleads with her again for the number. At that moment, the phone buzzes with 2 messages from a restricted number, the kidnappers. The first states they're at the burial site, and the other is a picture of Yeonwoo tied up, surrounded by burning flames. Seokheon breaks down crying, begging they can't set Yeonwoo on fire. He rushes over and grabs Jeonggi by the shirt, ignoring Jae-shik's warning, lifting her off the ground as he demands the number. Jeonggi instructs him to kneel and apologize, calling her mother. To Jae-shik's surprise, Seokheon drops to his knees, bowing and begging Jeonggi to save Yeonwoo while addressing her as mother. Jeonggi pats his head, saying if he'd been a good son from the start, none of this would have happened. She taunts him about the thought of his wife and child burning to death, shouting that's what she went through when cremating her daughter. Seokheon continues pleading as Jeonggi admits she doesn't actually know the kidnapper's number, laughing maniacally. Turning to Jae-shik, she gloats that the granddaughter he adores so much is about to be burned alive along with her great-grandson, adding if he'd given her shares of Myri construction, she would have taken them and left. She blames him for her actions, prompting him to slap her out of anger. Jeongi says she bets his heart feels like it's splitting, just as hers did losing her daughter Sujin. Jae-shik yells that if she wants Sujin at peace, she shouldn't be doing this. Jeongi screams back that it doesn't matter since Sujin is already dead. Suddenly, a man rushes in shouting they've found Yeonwoo, shocking Jeongi. Jeongi insists it's impossible they found Yeonwoo, as she's been meticulously planning her murder for a month. Seokheon instructs the man to take him to Yeonwoo immediately. Jeongi pleads with Jae-shik, claiming they couldn't have located Yeonwoo, but he pushes her away, ordering one of his men to take her to the police. As they head to Yeonwoo's location, the man informs Seokheon and Jae-shik that backup has already been dispatched ahead along with police support to aid in the search efforts underway. Upon arrival, firefighters are extinguishing the blaze. Seokheon crumbles to the floor, tearfully calling out Yeonwoo's name. He recalls earlier that day when Yeonwoo expressed worries about the maternity photoshoot, and he reassured her it would go great. If only he'd known this would happen, he would have listened, scrapped the idea, and stayed home with her. He should have told her he loved her one last time, thanked her, and spent more time talking to their unborn daughter Hope. Pushing away someone trying to console him, Seokheon rushes into the burnt ruins despite firefighters' attempts to stop him, frantically throwing debris aside while begging for Yeonwoo to appear, thinking she's merely upset with his tardiness. He apologizes, believing he was finally figuring out how to love her properly. Listing all their unrealized future plans together, he laments being responsible for ending Yeonwoo and Hope's lives. Regretting not letting Yeonwoo leave when she wanted or when she lied about Hope's paternity, sparing them this painful demise, Seokheon uncovers a knife in the ashes. Clutching it, he voices a desire to join them, needing to protect them as they climb the stairway of heaven. As he raises the knife to himself, Jae-shik shouts for someone to stop him. Seokheon's ringing phone halts his actions. Answering with Yeonwoo's name, he hears her agonized groans before she confirms it's her, explaining she's alone and thinks the baby is coming with contractions setting in, pleading for him to find her quickly. Hours earlier, Yeonwoo awoke to her captors discussing Jeongi's orders to burn her alive, prompting one to ignite a fuel lantern and set the place ablaze. Arguing they needed to kill Yeonwoo first before fleeing the collapsing building, they believed her still unconscious, vowing to push her back into the flames if she attempted escape. Realizing Hope's life depended on her composure, Yeonwoo burned her bound hands over the fire until the zip tie melted off, enduring agony while praying for divine help. A crashing portion of the house created an exit, allowing her to flee unnoticed into the woods, where her water broke. Spotting a vacant house nearby, she found a phone inside, finally able to call Seokheon as contractions started. Back in the present, Seokheon coaches Yeonwoo's breathing through another contraction, learning they're 5 minutes apart. Assuring her they've pinpointed her location, he's en route, as Yeonwoo knew he'd come and never break his promise. Minutes later, Seokheon bursts into the house, embracing Yeonwoo tightly. She remarks on his swift arrival as he thanks her for holding on and staying alive. Hours later at the hospital, a nurse wheels out Yeonwoo's crying newborn, secured in an incubator, into the waiting room where Seokheon and Jae-shik eagerly anticipate the baby's arrival. Jae-shik comments that the infant is the spitting image of Seokheon, right down to his boisterous cries. Seokheon inquires about Yeonwoo's condition, and the nurse informs him she'll be out within the hour, having already seen and thanked the medical team after delivering the baby safely. Seokheon reflects that Yeonwoo is stronger than he'll ever be, exhibiting remarkable fortitude as she always has. When the nurse takes the baby away for screening, an overwhelmed Seokheon sways, steadied by Jae-shik, who helps him into a seat while remarking that Seokheon is the fragile one, not Yeonwoo. Days later, Yeonwoo cradles her baby as Seokheon joins them, asking how she feels. Assuring him she's great, he offers to hold the infant to prevent straining her shoulders. She hugs the 4-kilogram newborn closer, wondering aloud if their son Shinwoo will later feel embarrassed by the scars on her bandaged hands. Seokheon quips that if so, he'll end his life, drawing laughter from Yeonwoo, who requests the formula. As Seokheon retrieves it, he comments that her wound seemed less serious than anticipated. Yeonwoo laments her inability to breastfeed due to burn medication, instead using the formula to feed Shinwoo. Seokheon observes approvingly as the hungry infant takes to the bottle, remarking he eats like his father. Munsan arrives, joining in doting over the newborn, declaring him Seokheon's carbon copy, albeit so red. Seokheon insists he looked better as a baby. Munsan explains newborns often appear flushed but fare out over time, like her daughter who arrived rosy but is now pale. After finishing his bottle, Seokheon takes Shinwoo, vowing the boy must grow into a good son knowing how much his daddy cares. He burps the satiated infant as Munsan praises his burgeoning childcare prowess. Seokheon offers to hold Shinwoo so Yeonwoo can attend to her needs, prompting her to rush off to the bathroom. Munsan and Jae-shik marvel at Yeonwoo's resilience, sympathizing over her need to persistently pump breast milk despite the discomfort. Seokheon reveals Yeonwoo remains determined to breastfeed, making Munsan wonder aloud if the breast pump pain is truly worthwhile. An uncertain Seokheon ponders whether Yeonwoo must subject herself to such an ordeal. A few nights after being discharged from the hospital, Shinwoo's cries wake Seokheon in the middle of the night. Yeonwoo, asleep on a mattress beside the baby, stirs to soothe her wailing son. Seokheon stops her, insisting he'll tend to Shinwoo himself. Cradling the crying infant, he carries him to the kitchen where Munsan advises him to rest for work the next day. Unfazed, Seokheon requests she warm up Yeonwoo's breast milk, as she has recovered enough from her burns to resume nursing. As he feeds his hungry son, Seokheon pleads for him to stay quiet through the night, even jokingly threatening to cut off his milk supply if disobeyed. Once satiated, Seokheon serenades Shinwoo with a lullaby, gently rocking him to sleep as Jae-shik observantly watches from nearby. Days later, Yeonwoo meets Jae-shik in the greenhouse where he presents her with an arrangement of orchids he cultivated himself. Touched by their beauty, she grows misty-eyed gazing outside at the heavily falling snow. Seokheon and Jae-shik join her in admiring the potentially record-breaking snowfall of the season. Yeonwoo asks if Jae-shik knows the symbolism of moth orchids, harbingers of approaching happiness. She surmises her late grandfather left the Yeonwoo orchids as his final wish for her to love, be loved, and live joyfully for a long time to come, just as he requested. With this beautiful story comes to an end. If you enjoyed it, please let us know below. Your comments mean a lot to us. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao.